from 9:09 and then the regular meeting from 9:16. Do we have a motion?
Lambert, so move.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Chair, not to put words in Commissioner Foley's words here, the minutes did make mention of his term expiring the end of this year. I believe the context was next year, is that correct? And by the time the ordinance was to be completed, I believe his comment was to the effect that his term
Was
would
it
be
this year?
expired.
This December you're done, aren't you?
No, next December.
Yeah.
Oh, next
yeah,
December.
So
Okay,
just a
cool.
technical detail there. We do hope to have him around another year.
Very good, yeah, you're not going anywhere.
You're not letting me off the hook, huh?
All
No,
right.
that's right.
All in favor of our commented upon a motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, new business. We are going to hear from our friends with Swanson Hascam and hear a little bit about the zoning update process.
Here we go.
Mr. David, you want to do an introduction, or are we ready to go?
We're okay.
I like it, that sounds good.
We're okay if I take this off, right, for the talking? Okay. Mostly because it'll be muddled otherwise. So good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. It's awesome to be here. We thought it would be a good idea to come in and say hello since you guys selected us. So we'd like to start by saying thank you very much. And we're really excited to work on your project. So obviously Mike Lamb's with me at the end of the table over there. I said we'll do hand motions and gestures to talk through our item. Our goal is really to be pretty brief this evening because I know we've got the future land use discussion on the agenda. And when we saw that, we actually thought the zoning is a really important piece of that it will implement your land use plan. So this is a perfect meeting for us to be at so we can hear your discussion and understand how that might correlate with the zoning code update portion. So we're not here to talk very much tonight. We just wanted to say hello, thank you. Talk to you a little bit about the schedule because we did talk about that briefly during the interview process, but after going back and kind of putting then some dates to the timeline that we put in our RFP, our proposal, I should say, our response to your RFP, we looked at it and said, you know, our first phase in our RFP or our proposal, we said that we would put together a visioning memo and sort of that kickoff of where we're headed and what direction we're going. And when we put that to months since we got started right away, it looks like we'll actually have something to you for phase one by the end of this year. So that will be probably in December. It'll be great holiday reading, I'm sure. And so Mike and I talked about, you know, whether we come back with you in person in December or whether or not we do that via WebEx or whatever that happens to be. We'll kind of figure that out as we get a little bit closer. We will check in with you next month as well because there's some work we're going to be doing between now and then, which some of that is in front of you tonight, which we'll talk about briefly. But we will plan that we're going to have a draft at least of that vision memo by the end of the year, which is kind of exciting. Sometimes contracts go along very quickly, and that's fantastic. Others, I feel like we're delayed by like 4 months, and we wouldn't be starting. So the other piece I would say is that we came up, Mike and I were up, I think it was about 2 weeks ago now, and spent the whole day here, or a good portion of the day. So we started off by speaking with staff and kind of getting the skinny on your community in terms of what have you guys been talking about, what's going on, what's the political environment like, what's going to happen or not happen with the election, what has been happening with the comprehensive planning process, obviously understanding the land use component of it, which obviously is on your agenda tonight. So really kind of getting as much information as we could in a really consolidated period of time, which is about an hour and a half, I think, 2 hours.
And the Charter Commission.
That's right. And the Charter Commission, which sounds like there's some super awesome rules in your charter, which I always enjoy. So we
Which we are not changing.
I really don't. I don't think you should really. Some of those things should just live on forever. So that part was actually a fun discussion. But anyway, so then after we met with your staff, we moved on and actually toured the vast majority of your community. So we thought we would take advantage of the nice weather, which the good news is we did, because it was 2 weeks ago and it was about 70 degrees or 70, low 70s, as opposed to our snow that we have right now. So initially, we actually had that as part of phase 2 of our project or our scope. But I said, hey, as long as we're kicking off, why don't we take advantage of it actually being nice? And it turns out that might have been a really good idea based on what's going on right now. So Mike and I walked around with your planning commission chair and I believe Commissioner Duval. And during that process, we hit your downtown quite a bit and kind of walked down some of those secondary streets. And then also went and visited several of your neighborhoods to get a sense of, when you guys talk about neighborhood, what does that mean from a geographic perspective and what part of the city are we in, et cetera. So we were up here for quite some time, but it was very informative because we got to see a lot about how your neighborhoods look, feel, et cetera, like what types of housing products are in them, how are the businesses oriented, what do the roadways feel like, et cetera. So the other thing which is completely, I noticed as I was driving in today, and that was because I came a different direction thanks to my Google lady, I can't believe how much color you guys have on your structures, and it's kind of really cool. A lot of times you go into towns and everything is beige, white, and gray. And I couldn't believe how much color is actually in a lot of your areas. And then that made me reflect on when we were driving around and kind of having the same feeling. So from a character perspective, it really does kind of define you. And when you're doing something like, having 6 inches of white snow, all of a sudden the colors seem to pop a lot more and feel a lot warmer instead of a whole bunch of white and beige houses. So that's a complete and total side note based on my route this afternoon. But I know, Mike, I want to give you a chance if there was anything that just like jumped out at you as we were touring, or maybe on your drive, maybe Google lady brought you there.
No, I just always come by the lake. Thank you. No, I'll only echo Jennifer, we really appreciate your recommendation and support kicking this off and moving forward with the zoning code update, so we're excited about that. And I'll just echo everything Jennifer said. It was interesting on the tour to go, was it Kirkwood Street? Kirkwood, right?
Kingwood.
Kingwood, I knew it was something like that. It used to be the old commercial street, so we got a little bit of walking through this. I thought that was very interesting. That's all I have.
Okay.
Kingwood.
Did you have a chance to, excuse me, did you have a chance to see go into the businesses on Washington Street at all?
We did not go into them.
You,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Mhm.
So we obviously did mostly exterior. We were
Mhm, yeah,
walking, driving, et cetera. But
Mhm.
yeah, it was. There's a lot of really different, like from a character defining perspective, like really a lot of differences. I mean, downtown really has a unique feeling to it compared to other locations. But even from a neighborhood perspective, the neighborhoods really feel really different. So I was glad that we had the opportunity to really go and see as much of it as we could. I'm sure we will also go out once again, but maybe, well, I don't know, it probably will be snowing because it's 2020 and I think that's gonna bleed into 2021. So we're probably gonna still have snow in June, the way this is going. So there probably will be snow when we do it again. But from my perspective, you can't replace actually experiencing it and seeing it and then understanding or trying to figure out the best way to codify that and put that into action. So, so the piece that's, oh yeah, go ahead.
Just a suggestion for Dave. Next time they come up, why don't we see if we can get onto the transit and have a bus tour or something?
So, we joked because we ended up having 2 different vehicles because of the number of people.
Mm-hmm.
I actually kind of joked with Administrator Bergman of like, wouldn't it be great if I could get a bus?
Mm-hmm.
And the response actually was, they actually looked at that in the past, I think when she was at the HRA, and the answer was no.
Why not?
Probably a legality issue. Not legality, a liability issue.
Oh, we've done it before, that's why I
Oh,
brought it up.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Planners are a rough crowd. So yeah.
Party.
So, all right, so the piece that we're actually here to ask for your help with, I was joking on our tour that one of the things we like to do is give homework everybody enjoys quite a bit, I know. But I promise there won't be too much as we go through this, but one of the things we like to do when we kick off a project, especially something like a zoning ordinance update project, is really to get an understanding of how you guys have used the code, if you use the code, if you rely primarily on staff, what parts of it work well for you, what parts don't. And it doesn't have to be, we're not looking for, like a paper on it. We're not grading it. It's really just to get a sense of, you as commissioners are responsible for being able to make recommendations about an application and really be able to understand how does the code apply with what's being asked of you and what the applicant is requesting. How might it fit? How doesn't it fit? And at least in a lot of the places that I work, planning commissioners oftentimes will tell me, code is so frustrating, it doesn't do X, Y, Z, or I feel like it's stuck in 1965 and really it's 2020, and there's this huge disconnect between the types of things that are in it and what we want to be able to approve in our community today. So it's really just to try to get a sense from each of you as individuals, how do you use it? Is it user-friendly from your perspective? And also to think about a time when an application may have come through that was really challenging for you, and why was it challenging from your perspective? So we will end up discussing all of this as a group, but I find that it's good to do this as an individual, because you really get the chance to think, reflect about how you've used it, and really go through your history of how many applications have we. I think at the last one we talked about variances in particular. So do you feel like we have so many variances, clearly something's really wrong, right? Or those types of things anecdotally for yourself. So that's what we're looking for in this questionnaire. I handed it out hard copy just so that you guys could kind of peruse it, get a sense of the types of things we're going to be looking at. But we are happy to send it to you electronically so you can fill it out that way. I know myself, I like to type far better than I like to write. So we can certainly do that as well. But if you're a writer and you want to write it down, that's absolutely fine too, and you can submit it back to staff. So our goal is, we've got a return date by November 9th, which is a couple weeks from now. And if you could get that back to us, then the goal is we will take that, try to compile the feedback that we get, and then probably be back in front of you at your next planning commission meeting, which may be webinar. We might be in front of you electronically up for that one. We'll probably have a blizzard. And so we can talk about that. No?
No, we're not
He
gonna have a
shakes his
blizzard. We're not gonna have a blizzard, no, okay.
He acts like it's gonna be balmy. So, but anyway, so that will give us enough time to compile your feedback and then try to present it back and say, here are some of the trends that we're seeing. Obviously, we know that we're talking about form-based or form-forward types of adjustments to portions of your code. This isn't to supersede that or to say that we're not doing those things. This is really to try to get into the weeds a little bit with you guys in terms of how you've used the code over the last, however you're telling us. I was going to say last couple of years, but I guess I don't know if you've all been here for the last couple of years. So with that, Mike, do you have anything to add from a questionnaire perspective? No? All right, he's happy, he's good to go. Do any of you have any questions before we move over to Andrews?
Just a couple of remarks. Well, one, if we could get an electronic copy, that'd be great. So I don't know if you want to give it to David and let David forward or something. That'd be super easy to do that.
Yep.
And the second point was the tour was really fun. Of course, I've lived in this town for just about my entire life. I still saw things from a different perspective. You come in with people from an outside perspective, and it's interesting. And my thing I was struck by was what a large sort of disconnected town we have. You go to all these, you go to all these little neighborhoods, you think, this is really part of my town. You're like over on 9th Avenue, 10th Avenue, over northeast over there, and then you far down in Graydon. It was interesting to see the challenge that we have of weaving this town into a cohesive whole, or treating it as a cohesive whole, when it's really like 3 or 4 little towns that are just kind of in the same spot. So I found it a very interesting experience, so it was fun. Anything else? Anybody else?
Don, we identify ourselves in those little things too. We don't identify us as Brainerd, we're either northeast, north, and all that stuff too, so, yeah, be interesting
I
to
would agree.
change.
Cool. Anything else? If not, thank you so much. I appreciate it, to you and Mike. It was a good experience doing the tour, and I look forward to returning the survey, and we'll talk again.
Thank you.
All right. We are then going to move along to the public forum. It's already the public forum. This is your chance, Mike. If you have anything to say, I'm going to open a public forum here at 6:18. You don't have to go.
Oh, no, I'm just,
And Mr. Chair, we have no call-in users.
No calling? All right, very good. All right, I'm opening the public forum at 6:18. This is a chance for people to discuss any matters that are not on tonight's agenda. Once again, saying nothing, we will close it at 6:19. And then we're moving along to word, item 7. This will be discussion of the future land use map, or as it was so succinctly put, the flu map. Yeah, I'm still warming up to that, the flu map. Yeah.
Flu is, the flu, sometimes flum.
Plum might be better than flu. Okay.
I call it flu too.
Yeah, flu, all right. Ashley, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, good evening. It's good to see you all again. So tonight, there's 4 goals that I want us to work through. So the first is to discuss our future growth boundaries citywide. So we'll look big picture, big scale. Then we'll zoom into each focus area and we'll work through one by one. We're anticipating a relatively robust conversation about what our downtown district looks like. Remember, we kind of set ourselves up for that conversation at our last meeting. Then we're going to talk about what does flu or future land use look like beyond city limits. I'll share a few conversations that I had with my colleagues down at Crow Wing Township. They are also going through a comp plan at the exact same time that you guys are going through your amendment, which is really interesting. But I had a good conversation that I'll share at that time. And then number 4 is I want us to work through the next steps and try to put a schedule down so we can hit some of those mile markers. And I will acknowledge that you have 5 planners in the audience. So it's a really fun and safe space for me in the audience. But I can tell you what, if we don't know the answer, we will be able to figure it out with 5 people here with a planning background. Sean just stepped out as our GIS expert, but I know that we'll have a great conversation tonight. So let's, and James is going to drive for us, right? Okay, good deal. Can you pull up the citywide future land use map?
Draft plan, James.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so at our last meeting, we identified 12 key growth areas within the city. We met in August, right? Was that the last time we saw each other?
I think so.
August and October 21st, we identified a 13th growth area that's on the far northeast side up on by the Anderson property. So we'll include that one tonight in our discussion. But this is the first time you'll see your brainstorming in a GIS format, in a map, which is kind of fun. So James, would you go then to the, yes, thank you. The parcel layer is a bit overwhelming, the white layers, but that's mainly just for context. But anything beyond city boundaries, that is a direct reflection of your 2004 comp plan. Simply copy and paste it over. There's been some changes with recent either subdivision or lot combinations or lot splits since 2004. Remember, we're a lot of years later, but is the closest direct reflection of that 04 map. So keep that in mind as we move forward. I do want to come back to this after we go through the specific growth areas, and I'll share the conversation with my colleagues down at Crow Wing Township. So let's jump into our first growth area. This is on the northwest side of town. And you all talked about this area being mixed residential. So what I'm looking for all of you is to chat amongst yourselves and say, is this a go? did we capture it well? Do we need to omit something? Do we need to change anything? And I'm your pencil and your note taker.
All right, the floor is open.
And I have a laser pointer if we need to.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, please.
I think it's a go. I think I like the way it works out here. A couple of comments that I did have, though, are, you know, on some of the small parcels along the Mississippi River. It doesn't make a lot of sense to make those development reserve by virtue of how you've defined them in this table. I think those make sense as probably low to medium density.
No, this one doesn't have.
Where, I'm sorry, Mike, where, do I have the wrong one? No, I don't. Which ones are we talking about here? Do you mind?
If I can finger point, this parcel here, this parcel here, and
Oh, that's, okay, that's develop reserve, okay.
for the benefit of others.
Mr. Chair, can I pop in with one comment?
Yes,
As we
please.
work through? So anything beyond the growth areas that you all identified, we again just copied and pasted over the 2004 plan. So if you find that something looks funny or it doesn't feel right, now is the perfect time to address that.
And, Mr. Chair, if I may, the public, semi-public institution parcel on Delmar, that one is already a commercial, is that? David, maybe you could help me think about that. That was probably like part of the subdivision reserve for like a convenience store or something? Is that,
That's a commercial yeah, that
We're
was,
in 01 Northwest Residential.
I don't think it was that parcel.
no? Okay,
I know what parcel we're talking about, it's like a random B4. Yeah, it's not that one.
okay. So that, maybe that's something associated with the trail then, and the trailhead or something.
But those ones, and I didn't catch this earlier, I tried to review these before and made some comments to Ashley, and I apologize, Ashley, I didn't catch this one.
Okay.
Those ones should just probably be associated with the residential, as those are parcels that falls in the Delmar Estates development with, it's the same developer who's working on, Brainerd Oaks, so.
isn't,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, David,
Yes,
isn't,
Dan.
where is that commercial spot? There is a commercial,
Yeah, it's right at it's like right at the corner, it's a random right at the corner of Beaver Dam and Wise. I can't pick it out directly in here with in this map, but it's in there. It might be that triangle right there.
yeah. Okay, wasn't there a, if I remember right, wasn't it platted, there was a CUP in there? And wasn't there a small section that was for commercial, like, not like a convenience store, but something very similar to that, more like a little neighborhood
And
area?
that's what Commissioner, I think, Duval was mentioning. And I don't know, again, I don't know exactly all the history of that, but I think I mentioned that it sounds like that maybe at one point there was a CUP there and then it never got built. I don't know the exact history
Yeah, that's-
about that parcel and why it is the way it is, but.
But that would be,
And again, just remember, this is the future, so this is what, regardless of what it is zoned right now, what would we want it to be? You know, do we want it in the future, 10 years from now, to still be a commercial use?
Dan, can I ask you, from 2004, what you remember, was there any conversation about a trailhead or something at that location?
are you talking, no, the trailhead was on the farm.
Okay.
Yeah, on the farm. But where is Northtown?
Northtown
Go-
is further south,
Just at the bottom
right
screen.
there. We have all those streets,
Tangle of streets there.
Okay,
that's Northtown.
okay, so,
And from my perspective, I believe the mixed residential fit there. Because even though what's being built right now is predominantly solely single family, there are a bunch of townhomes that were originally built there that currently exist. And there's, I think some of that area was platted with townhomes in mind. There already kind of is a mix of multifamily and single family in there.
Right before Northtown, that was a CUP. That's when they had some retail in it. But I know the CUP went away, but I don't know
Yeah,
necessarily.
and that orange box that you have right there, that's where that care facility is.
Okay,
Senior care facility.
Edgewood?
Edward is here?
Yep.
Yeah. So somewhere. Okay, well, it must not be, they must have lost all that then. But I thought we did have a little B4 in there.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, please.
thank you. North of County Road 49, we're showing that as low density, medium density, correct? So I'm going to take advantage of all of the really smart planners in the room and ask this question. It appears to me that we have low density, or we have designated some of these areas as residential in what, in my opinion, is unbuildable ground. I don't know if you can pull up the floodplain map, but, so my question is as planners, do we take into consideration the buildability of a parcel when we are potentially overlaying a map of what its use should be, specifically in those low-lying or wetland areas? And I think that there's, we might be able to pull up the floodplain map easily off the GIS, I don't know, David, but especially north of 49 and to the east of Del Mar, there's some areas in there that, in my opinion, are 100% not buildable in the floodplain. So my question is, should they be residential or should they be designated as something else? Preserve? I don't know, so.
Essentially, you're asking, should we add a lot more green to that area, right? 'Cause we
That's where I'm going with this. Should we be putting a residential areas in places that realistically cannot and probably will never be built residential? Is there a better,
And, Mr.
Approach.
Chair,
Yes,
again, this area here, we had somebody that wanted to build back in there, so they would have had to go through there, but the testing wouldn't allow it. You know,
that's where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
is-
the testing wouldn't allow it to put any building on there. And the highland on this is way back in the back, almost a half a mile or so back on that. So I guess we just left it as swamp or whatever it's called there.
Mike?
Yeah, Kevin, that's a great question and a great observation. My thoughts on that are that if we were to put those into park and open space, we're probably removing parcels that do have buildable ground. I would expect otherwise they'd be taxed forfeit, you know what I mean? So I think there's enough high ground there that you can squirt maybe one house onto the big 20 or 40 acre lot, and that's probably all you're gonna get out of those things. But if we are aware that some of these really don't have a buildable spot without addition of fill, we probably need to acknowledge and think about it the way you're challenging us to.
So now we're looking at is that a flood map we're looking at this point?
That's just a generic GIS. But you'll see there, when you see all the different changes between that light and that dark, that's all wetland.
So everything darker is wetter, is that right?
I believe the FEMA map is in this area if
Yeah,
you
it
click it
should.
on.
So you're saying the green is highland or the brown is highland?
Green would be high,
green
usually that
is
would
high.
indicate mature
Highland?
growth trees.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's a lot of swamp.
I didn't mean to get us off in the weeds here, so to speak.
I appreciate a good pun.
Or the cattails. There you go, look at
It has
that.
bogged
We're
down
off the
again, as it were. What else can we pull on that?
Does look like there is some buildable in all that, yeah.
Some of those will require challenges in
Right.
Wetland Conservation Act to get to the high ground from the public road, but
If I may add, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, please.
To Commissioner Yeager's point, though, this is something to think about, because you gotta remember, one of the purposes of the future land use map is something that you go off of, the commission would go off of, say, should you get either someone who wants to come in and, for example, wants to do a PUD there, or is looking for a variance to kind of go around the wetlands in some different way. And that's where the future land use map would come into your kind of, your primary weapon as to whether or not you want to support it or not. Looking at the future land use map and going, well, what does it say? And if you're trying to do some kind of medium or high density residential, trying to squeeze a medium to high density residential in that area, the planning commission's got to look at this and go, well, is that what we intended, or the city intends to do?
One of the things that I've seen in some other cities in our county is that when they have a parcel of land, like down Nickel Road in Breezy Point off 11, there was a large amount of wetland in there, and they needed 5-acre parcels when they divided up. They put the houses real close together, and they gave them each 4.5 acres of wetland on addition to it. So the houses ended up not being spread out the way that was intended for that type of a residential area. And then I don't know. And the poor people who ended up with those lots ended up with 4.5 acres of wetland that was sold to them as residential. So I see a very good point for marking it as green space, and then when you're going through the land use map and saying, we have all of this residential that has been built up to this percentage, and then we're not marking our green space in there, saying this is residential area that hasn't been used.
Any other thoughts on this? How can we direct Ashley here?
I think if someone is gonna go through the entire due diligence process, they'll have soil borings and find suitable septic sites and buildable areas, and if the process allows there to be residential there, I'm all for keeping it as it currently is, I guess.
I guess the question would be, is it easier to leave it residential and then later on say, no, or leave it as green and say, well, you know what, you found a buildable spot, we can work with it. I think we have to kind of build in some flexibility here, not go parcel by parcel, obviously. So that's the trick. Yes?
But to get to that buildable spot, that in the past, that was the big problem, how to get to that without having fill and everything in, and then doing the watersheds and everything. I mean, it just, on this spot, I don't think we should be doing anything about keeping it a green space. Because, well, about 7 years ago, it was not.
Right.
Was not doing you couldn't do anything, and it took us almost 4 months
Mr. Chair,
with all the tests.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to be clear, I'm not suggesting a change, I'm just entering it into the conversation
Yeah.
of, that's all I'm trying to do is raise this position of
Yeah,
putting non-buildable land into residential zoning. That's,
yes, please.
If I may add, just to, not to extend the discussion, but maybe guidance back to Ashley to help us think about, one aspect would be, like the example that, Teresa, you had, was maybe about, using density and clustering homes so that the area of land still has the net same amount of residences per area, but you've chosen to, for reasons of maybe saving a natural feature like an old growth forest or a wetland area or a prairie or what have you, you'd say, I'm gonna cluster the houses here. It meets the spirit of the code, and I think our PUD element of our ordinance is sort of the place where we can play a little bit with density like that, but that might be ways to think about these kinds of areas in a productive way. That says, okay, I've got a 40-acre parcel, and I might be able to do 8 5-acre lots, but I'm gonna take 8 houses, I'm gonna put them here.
Right.
And we might think that that's the way that you net out the same.
Right. Any other comments on 01, on the Northwest Residential? If not, let's move our discussion to 02. Does that sound good, Ashley, to move on to 02? All right. Thoughts on 02?
This was a fun conversation for you all. I think you enjoyed envisioning what this space could be in the west side. In your packet, there is a draft of the future land use categories, and I want to point out one item for you. Within our mixed commercial residential, that's what this district is called. We had great conversations about, at the end of the day, how heavy do we want commercial in terms of percentage, and how heavy do we want residential? What is that appropriate mix? Now, in a future land use classification, it normally doesn't get into percentages. So I want to encourage you to try to take away 60-40 and swap with some different terminology. So I put in there, we're seeking a balance of 60% commercial and 40% residential. I'm not sure if that feels right to you or if that's what you envision. I would implore us to remove the numbers and talk about things like predominantly. That sort of phrases, okay? Hit it, Mr. Chair.
All right. My first thought here is, and I think Mike's gonna sort of agree with me, one of the things that we're gonna run into too, and also in moving along when we get to what we call the Mississippi corridor, is the lack of green space in West Brainerd. There's really, West Brainerd simply, you get to the other side of the bridge, doesn't have anything designated green or future park use. And kind of a philosophical thing, we don't have to get into this today, but I know the park board is looking at a master park plan.
Yes.
It'd be great to be able to have the master park plan tied to the future land. They the flu, they have to go back, they have to go together. It'd be great to see those go together. So the natural area is where Whiskey Creek leads into the, leads down to the Mississippi. And specifically, you all know where I'm looking at there. I'm looking just north of Tyrol Hills is where I'm looking at there. You can sort of see
Could you use the pointer maybe?
well, I could use the pointer, but then we're all kind of looking at different maps here.
Okay.
But what we're looking at, we're gonna focus in, yeah. Essentially, it's the little arm that reaches in down to the river, just north of Tyrol Hills there. And that is a green area. That's a beautiful little wooded area right there. So I would just think that maybe we want to think of that as a green space and not as a future, what do we have now? We have a mixed commercial and residential, is that right at this point? I just don't think, that's one of those cases, that land, it'd be pretty tough to get in there and really build anything, especially when you get down into the floodplain, the wet area down there.
And this is exactly, ties back to our previous map conversation, that those are tax forfeited parcels specifically, one is county, or maybe they're both county, one's city, I think.
The
yeah, I
big
thought it
one,
was
the
city.
big
The
one
big
is
parcel.
actually was purchased.
How's that, please?
The one to the south there, that big one,
Yep.
was actually recently purchased during the county auction.
This one?
No, north of that one.
And you know
Isn't
who
there
was purchased
public
by?
access to the river
That's
right there?
really reflects off
Yep,
of
that
it.
one is now privately owned.
Okay, that's what I was looking
I thought there was public access to the river on that smaller parcel to the south.
Here, this is all floodplain down here. There's the, this is the draining. This is so hard. We got the big pit down, and the big drainage pond down here, Mike?
Yep.
Right in here, sorry.
I'll use electric.
But
So-
this is here is usually, a lot of water back there.
Right, so, David, are you saying the one with the jack pine stand on it, going down the bottom?
Yeah, the one that had the original Riverside Drive on it.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that one is now privately owned.
Okay, okay,
This one here?
that's largely
Or this one?
floodplain forest.
Yeah.
The parcel below it, may I?
Right here.
You may.
Yes, thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
So that one is floodplain forest as well, and the two to the riverside of that
These two.
are also floodplain forest. Those are city-owned, I believe, are they not city owned parcels? So
I'm not
that's,
100% sure.
I'm thinking city owned.
yeah. So, and one of those is the terminus of Jackson at the river. I think it's platted all the way to the river, and that's one that city owns. But that gets at some of these undevelopable lots, but
Yeah.
there is clearly high ground on that one that obviously someone saw value there. It's got a nice jack pine forest on it, or plantation on it, and on the river, so it's a nice
Hopefully they're
lot.
not thinking about mini storage.
I don't think there's a public, I don't recall a public access down there.
Public land leading to the water.
Oh, to the water.
If you had a canoe or something, I suppose you could legally dump it in there, couldn't you?
You have to go almost.
Well, it's still, Jackson is still platted to the river, right? And that's,
All the street?
yeah, so it's just not would it be low maintenance, or however you designate that?
Right.
So that is accessible down there.
Mr.
I
Chair,
was
Yes,
wondering,
I'm gonna try again to ask for the planner's help. So, This is one of the areas of the land use map that has me scratching my head the most, is what I perceive to be subjectivity in the application of our vision. And commercial residential mixed, to me, is highly subjective. You have 3 lots in a row, they end up being commercial, like, the next one comes to us, they say, well, we'd like to do commercial, but our vision is something different. I'm gonna ask the people in the room, how do you draft language, which is what you're specifically asking us to do, that supports subjectivity in a non-subjective manner?
That's a lovely question. I appreciate you thinking through that lens. You're also an architect and you're forced to think that way, so thanks for asking it. I've thought a lot about how do we regulate, how do we craft language to support bringing your vision to fruition? And me personally, and all of us are going to speak to this, I think any mixed commercial residential future land use classification or district that you identify would benefit from a sub-area plan.
From a
That
what? I'm
essentially means a master plan. So Jana had said, I think these areas would benefit from a sub-area plan. So you would master plan these small sections or areas within the community, where then, Kevin, when you get an application and you're trying to assess how does this align with our vision, you can pull out your sub-area plan and you can say, this is the type of commercial that we were seeking, or this is the form that we were trying to seek.
Gotcha.
That's just my opinion.
Other planners? Yeah.
So something like no more than 3 lots in a row can be commercial use, or is it something like that where what you're saying is you break this larger section up into smaller sections and say that within this small area, you're allowed this, but not this, or a max of this many? Is that what I'm hearing?
Question.
That's what's got me scratching my head on mixed use.
Or could you, on that there, or anything like that, could you designate, I'm gonna just pick something here, that this area here would be, just be able to be you could whatever your, sub where you could have
Sub-area.
commercial and maybe some medium density residential. Can you just do this area? Can you designate an area within that, or?
Well, sure. So a master plan, it's a parcel by parcel or relatively larger acreage design. So
Okay.
it will give you a plan rendering or a master plan on the alignments of buildings where the sidewalks are gonna be, boulevard trees, parking, on-street, off-street parking lots, high residential development, commercial development, mixed use. I mean, I'm just brainstorming here. It'll essentially give you the ingredients for success. Not sure if I answered your question.
No, I think, yeah, you did.
Mr. Chair?
Chris?
Maybe this is getting too nitpicky, but I tend to think of Tyrell Hill, that area, as more low-medium density. And then the stuff right to the west of it more is that, is how we're showing it here.
Mike?
Mr. Chair, to follow that point up, as I look at the definitions that you've provided for the mixed residential, no single type dominates any given area. As Commissioner Foley pointed out, well, you've got sort of low density in the Tyrell Hills. On the other end here, you have between 5th and 6th, sandwiched between James and Jackson, you've got a commercial district, general commercial. And then you go next to medium-high density, I think that's trailer park maybe. And then you're back over to general commercial. And then to the north, you're general commercial. I mean, does it make sense? Do those, as you take those blocks and think about them as a whole, does that meet the definition of mixed commercial residential? How do we think about it? Does that violate the standard of no single type dominates? Maybe the dominant emphasis is on the block. It's all commercial in between 5th and 6th. It's all residential between 6th and 7th. So those were things that I was thinking about when I looked at that part of the map. And then And then if I were to try and think about what kinds of commercial uses would fit there, would a Target store fit there in that definition, as we would think about, you know, whatever the proportions are? Thank you for letting us dismiss those, because I wanted to talk about those a lot. Otherwise, we'll not. Or an auto shop, or a small engine repair, or a gas station. You know, what does that look like to help us think about what mixed commercial residential would look like? And
Commissioner Duval, if I may kind of start to address that. You know, one thing that I look at when I see this is, one of the things I think about is mixed residential commercial is, again, because this is your future land use map, so your high level, which then would break down to your zoning map, is what kind of commercial and I think where you're going, commercial and residential uses go together. And unfortunately for you, Commissioner Yeager, subjectivity is where this comes in. Is, to your question, does a Target fit there? I think the commission could make a very good argument to say, no, a Target does not fit the idea or the intention of a mixed commercial residential. Nowhere would you slap a Target within 50 yards of a residential property. You never do it. But that doesn't mean you might not do an office building. You know, a well-placed office building might fit there. Or a neighborhood convenience store might fit there, because it goes well with the neighborhood idea of, here's a little store, or, you know, your old idea of a corner store that the people that live in Tyrell Hills or the other residential areas can easily walk to, get a few things, and go back home. That might fit there. Then those kind of uses, they're symbiotic. Other uses, they're not. And so I think that's another way to think about this. Granted, in the definitions that Ashley provided, you kind of get to that. It talks about light, general, and commercial mixes. You know, that's kind of where I start to go, okay, what is a light or general? Target is not a light or general use.
now, it would help that those definitions crossed with our definitions, so I could get in my head what light looks like and what general looks
and
like.
that's where I think goes the next level of, as we adopt this, working with the Swanson Haskamp team of going, okay, we've determined that this is mixed residential. What does that mean in the zoning wise? So we're gonna go another level down. You know, right now I think we have it all zoned R2. Well, does that mean it's, you know, looking at a different way, does that mean we're allowing, you know, 1 to 4 units of residential plus office? You know, kind of what our B2 would be right now? Is that what we're shooting for? Or are we allowing, you know, everything up to a full apartment building and Walgreens, which already exists, but is a little bigger a use?
Thank you.
I agree with what Duval was saying too. When I see mixed commercial residential, what my vision of that is to see where you have the family homes along there, but instead of a typical garage, somebody is probably moving their heating and air conditioning business from along Washington Street to, maybe they need to construct a pole barn on their property. And so they're keeping their equipment and running their business from that mixed-use property, so they need a residential and commercial property. And I see a lot of home-based businesses running out of something like that, where they're going to come to the city and say, we want to build a pole barn, not a traditional garage. That sort of thing.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Is this potentially an area where you have the ability to control the use by the architecture? And where I'm going with this is, if you take an area that's mixed use like this, and you can begin to identify what the type of architecture that is acceptable in this area, is that a mechanism of which to predict an outcome of the types of businesses and houses that will coexist? So if your code says you can't build sidewalls taller than 14 feet or have flat pitched roofs, you have to have Is that a mechanism of which we can use?
You are going to love your form-based code.
Yes.
Mr. Lamb down there, who's, I think, original background is architecture.
Mike, I think you had a point. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple things here, because the blue is Gateway, that's a commercial district, right? The blue. And then, so the red is commercial, that orange is, somebody say multifamily. So between fifth, sixth, and seventh, that's mixed commercial residential, right? I mean, on the ground today, right? So when I look at the pink and I hear mixed residential, commercial, mixed commercial, residential, I see a large area that looks and feels like residential, that we're basically saying, no, we don't really know, so we're just gonna see what comes along and we'll just catch whatever we can here. So there's a little bit of, it's just not very differentiated from that perspective. Because you can clearly see residential lots are platted. But, so in that pink area, you could do, somebody said, auto repair shop across from a kindergarten, across from a fourplex, across from a single family, you could have that pattern in this land use category?
No single use dominating, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay, so, I mean, so to me, there's something, when you lean back on the zoning code, you're gonna wanna have some similar associated values and predictability about the land value of my property, so are there general, just mixed-use categories that we're working with, or is that the only one you have for the land use plan?
A lot of this language was pulled from your '04 plan.
Okay.
So if we're finding this does not fit, doesn't feel good, we do not like where this is going, that's great, let's recognize that and introduce new language and a new vision.
Well, the point I was gonna make here, and I like your idea, Ashley, about sub-area studies, because in our scope, we have two sites we were gonna look at as sort of conceptual areas. There were more sites than there were this, but we could probably expand it a little bit in terms of thinking about, I'm looking at the boss, okay? We could expand this a little bit to think about some of these areas and test them a little bit, right along the lines of what Ashley's describing. From a form-based standpoint, yeah, you can regulate some of this with its form, but if you go and look at what's the predominant character there, I think I drove through this area last time I was here, because there's a lot of undeveloped lots in there, aren't there?
I'll just go up there just a second. So this is another piece I think maybe you can interpret this thing. So this here is Tyrell Hills.
Yeah.
Is developed.
Yeah,
This essentially 4 block area here is undeveloped.
yeah.
Well,
Mostly.
There's like random one there. There's
Yep.
a tool shed here, but it's mostly, I would say 80% undeveloped.
Right.
And that's why this is getting a bunch of attention, because
Yep.
the planning commission actually addressed this a little bit. I think I talked to you too about it, where the proposed storage units were gonna go. And that's why this is getting a lot of attention right now.
Because to me, this side of Brainerd seemed to have a lot of potential to me. I mean, just looking at it before when we were thinking about proposing on the code itself. But this could be an area where we could spend just a little time. We don't have a huge budget to do that, but we could spend a little time and sort of think through this with you as Ashley's going through this process as well. So I think it's going to be hard to debate it in one sitting.
Absolutely. Jan?
In some of the codes, we saw that, like commercial, some of the commercial had to be on arterial street, or, heavy streets. I don't see any of that in here, unless I'm missing it, but, like a commercial, there's like, I see Gateway District does, but even our commercial, that not all commercial can be on our city streets, correct? I mean, some of the trucks, they can't.
Well, I think you're thinking, Jen, that'd be more of an industrial.
I'm sorry, more
You're thinking
industrial.
more of an industrial. A delivery truck can go down pretty much all of our streets. A generic delivery truck. No, we're not gonna want some of these streets, no, do we want a 30-ton long body dump truck? No. But none of these are currently zoned to do that. That'd be something you find in our industrial park.
Okay.
Unless it's like during construction, you are not gonna get regular traffic of a 80,000-pound dump truck.
But, no, but that was one way of identifying, what kind of commercial was could be in that area. But So that, and so you're, an industrial would be in here would be Gateway District, would be considered industrial. 'Cause
No, when
that-
I'm thinking industrial, I'm thinking like down in our industrial park, like FedEx.
But how does it go in this where does it fall in this definition? Would it be a gateway district or commercial?
There is an industrial classification.
It's intended to
Other.
provide a series of industrial uses separated from other businesses concentrated as a location.
So the intention with this future land use map is we don't want any industrial in this area.
Well, I know we don't want anything in this area, but we want it within the city, and I guess that's
Yeah,
what
we're
I'm
getting
asking.
there, Jan. We're getting there.
So your
It's in a
definition
different
of,
So
area.
where's the definition, guys?
it is an other, the first category of other, Jan, I think has industrial. Second column,
Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry.
Yep.
I looked at that all day.
And just as we're, so can you just help me with gateway, is that intended to be, is that auto-oriented commercial, or is there another
I think, so,
distinction there?
I think what, it's not, Gateway is something that's become more of a conversation, I would say, in the last year, both of the planning commission and also the city council. Looking at what is the initial perception we give people as a community when they drive into our city? And right now, I think part of the reason it's getting an extra emphasis and attention is because MnDOT is in the planning stages for a full reconstruction of 210 in 2025. So this is kind of our opportunity to say, really look at like, what do we want the future of that main corridor that has 35,000 cars a day on it? What do we want it to look like?
We want to go from the mess we have now to what do we have, quote unquote, provide higher quality design elements for new commercial and residential construction along major thoroughfares, establishing an aesthetic travel corridor that supports walkability and establishes a density. That's what we want.
So we need a guinea pig for that too, I think, in terms of the code, we need to find it, because you've got Walgreens out there, and to me, that's your old code, and it could have performed higher, better, because it's got some nice elements to it, so.
Mr. Chair, if I may, while we're on this, I think Ashley's gotten a lot of information. I think Ashley and I especially can start playing with this area and try to add in a lot of the comments that were made. While we have this up, I just want to quickly touch on that block between Northwest 6th and Northwest 7th that is currently orange or yellow, whatever you call it, whatever color you want to call that. I'm a guy, so it could be like orange.
Rust.
That is currently the Westwood Trailer Park. Currently zoned in the current zoning code B4. And it's been B4 since like 1970. So it's been non-conforming for 50 years, I can do my math. The question when I I left that there because I specifically wanted to have this short conversation is, and we kind of discussed this a little bit in a previous one when we were at the fire hall. Is it the intention of the planning commission that be a residential block into the future? Take out West, not the question if you want Westwood there, but say Westwood goes away at some point. Do you want it to be kept with the idea of, oh, we want an apartment building there, or we want, some kind of a housing? Or do we want it to be, no, we want to infill that with commercial because commercial is everything around it?
Mike, if you have
my body language was just, no. Finish the narrative, baby, I'm ready.
Put your hand up. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, as previously stated in other meetings, where we have easy proximity to important infrastructure for residential development that's affordable and it's in a residential, we ought to keep it there. And this would be one place where we might be able to do medium, high density kinds of stuff. You can put it in. The pipes are stubbed out for sewer water. It makes sense to keep it in that use. The other uses between 5th and 6th aren't really aggressive commercial. You've got the mall on the other side of 7th, so that's pretty abrupt. But it's not that. These are more like car lots, I think, well, actually, I guess the whole block is car lot, isn't it?
Yep.
I think about it now, between Sixth and Fifth. Across the Jackson, you've got more office kinds of stuff, the VA services and so forth. So it may make sense in that way to keep that as an island for high density, medium-high density residential development. That's what it strikes me as. And again, if you want to be able to do affordable housing, at least eliminate the development costs of putting that major infrastructure in the ground in order to be able to start putting houses on there.
And I think putting humans there will help humanize it, and so it's less of just walking along closed, businesses and chain link fences, and more like people in a neighborhood and sidewalks, and it would bring a little humanity to it, so. Yeah, please.
We will hit Gateway on a number of the next kind of slides. So if I could just share a perspective that I feel about that. It doesn't look as much to me like it's a district as maybe it feels like shoreland in a way. It's almost like an overlay that guides. When you're in this overlay, you're gonna do additional standards or whatever. It's not gonna be the driving thing. So still underneath that is a brown, a blue, a green, or what have you, but because it's there. And the reason I mention that is on the east side of the river there, on the north side of 29, that block between Chippewa and the river is residential, and that's flagged as that blue, and this is talking about commercial, how we want to do commercial development. That's all residential there now, and if we're just saying, if this residence is ever converted to a commercial use, it's going to need to meet the standard. Is that kind of the intent of the gateway? And do we want the gateway to go all the way through the center of town from east to west on Washington, or is it an entry point and then it changes? Because there's some discontinuity on the east side of town. There's going to be discontinuities, or maybe the need to, or the opportunity to add on the south side of town on our gateways as we go through these. So just some thoughts about that, and maybe some clarifications as we go along, or understanding or intent of what we want to do with the gateway.
Our gateway definition does use the term low to medium density residential. So it's a pretty wide open definition of what we're working with. So in other words, a house is not necessarily, it's gotta go. Go ahead, Mike first.
Mr. Chair, quickly, if you look at what the market's doing, you look at Jimmy John's, and you got a new fast food going in next to it, right next to Taco John's.
Starbucks.
Fairly new
Starbucks.
food. That's what the market's delivering today. And so I think we got to keep that in mind and think about what gateway means, as opposed to, because this is your highway commercial, for lack of, if you want to talk about 1960s, let's throw 70s, 80s, throw we are with this. So you got to think about, really what that means in terms of what the market can bring to bear with your code. And right now, it's convenience.
Right.
Whether it's a drive-through pharmacy or it's a drive-through burger joint. Making it look better, and I'm just gonna say this, no offense to anyone putting lipstick on the pig, you can do that. But we also wanna think about, what does that gateway really mean? I mean, in terms of a form. In terms of, is it walkable, is it drivable, is it mixed use, is it not? So there's a lot to unpack there with gateway, I think, and just as a general category, so.
Good point. Ashley, anybody else? Any points on that? Do we feel like we're ready to move on to another slide? All right, so we are moving on to 3.
Which I believe takes the next 3 slides.
It is number 3. So 3 is the next 3 slides. 3, A, B, and C.
I'll preface and just set the stage really quick to remind you. So at our last meeting, we talked about, y'all were loving this idea of this beautified walkable corridor from right when you hit town on the west side all the way to Gregory Park. It was recommended that beautification, or that corridor enhancement, be expanded even further east up to Gregory Park. So just keep that in mind, and let's critique it and identify if it feels right and meets the vision of what you're thinking now and how it correlates to the comp plan.
Other thoughts?
Mr. Chair,
Please.
I'm just gonna throw this in the mix one more time. It's on a similar plane of conversation, is that I wonder if that a lot of our thoughts on specifically what we see on 210 isn't use as much as it is architecture and what the buildings look like, their shape, their condition, the way they're maintained, their position to the road, the green space in mix with those. And I'm wondering if this conversation shouldn't also include form, what we want it to look like. At least that's the way I personally feel. When I drive down 210 and I see an old rusty pole barn right directly next to the sidewalk, next to the road, that to me is something I don't want to see in that area. To me, it does not fit. It doesn't look right. It looks like commercial in what I want to see as the nice, the way the town should look just doesn't fit that for me personally. So I just feel like we need to be thinking about that it's a combination of use and architecture, or how to address both simultaneously. And
Absolutely.
I have no idea how to do that, but that's what we're all here to talk about anyway, so.
I agree. I think, I thank you for the compliment about the color coming into town. But I think we are kind of a drab. Our corridors coming into town are kind of drab. So I would like to see different architecture, different uses, something to kind of pop. So that, it's gonna cause them to slow down and say, hey, what's that?
Right.
So, that's what,
I love seeing all the buildings, not the pole barn, but like newer planned buildings, button up against the sidewalks and walkways and kind of hiding the parking in the back. You can kind of turn off the main street to get to those parking areas, but I feel like we're lacking a lot of that, and it's rundown buildings and parking lots and things everywhere that you're greeted with.
sometimes dirt, sometimes tar, and,
Yeah.
And I think if Kevin were to open a hydraulic repair business on Washington Street, and it would have trees in front of the business, and would have an architecture, and a tasteful business, I think everybody would say, great, have a hydraulic diesel repair business right there.
That's, exactly, yeah. Half them buildings, if they were just grown over with ivy, I'd be happy, to be honest with you.
right now what we have, it would be nice to.
Yeah. I went through some family pictures recently, and I pulled out one that my father took from the water tower, looking west. And I posted on the share story, well, everybody goes on that page. Anyhow, the picture's amazing. It's looking at the depot and looking west. And Washington Street is tree lined. All the way it's tree lined. And it's such a different look. The whole field, everything looks soft. All the commercial buildings are behind trees. And we've just lost that. It's just become, frankly, it's just kind of an armpit. A lot of areas of Washington have come at this point. And that's why I think it's exciting to look at a new definition of gateway and what it is, and then turn to the form-based and put it in codes. Because that's the notion that we get our future land use map, and that is going to feed ordinance change. That's the real work we're doing here, so I think the vision is right. Other thoughts on the series of slides?
So just, again, that question about gateway on the bottom slide, commercial on the south side of Washington is just general commercial, and would we think about a tier or a distance off of Washington and saying that this is gonna need to fit that gateway overlay concept? So there's one place where it looked like it was missing.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, please.
to me, it's almost like gateway is not quite the right, to me, it feels like it should say high visibility area versus gateway, because to me, gateway is like ends of the, at the outer reach of the city, that's what you first see when you're coming in from Crosby, or coming in from Little Falls, or coming in from Baxter. I don't know, it's just
Yeah.
we're talking about kind of those areas entirely through the town, so it's those high traffic, high visibility corridors.
Corridors, yeah.
It's the front door.
Mm-hmm.
And, but yeah, it was just, Mike, do you have a thought over there, Mr. Lamb?
Mr. Chair, so if we can zoom in, can you zoom in on between first and fourth, fifth? Yeah, over to that. Yeah, okay, the upper right. Okay, so Gillis, and then it's first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and then it's Cub. So that's a very, I mean, you can't get a better development pattern than that. It's walkable, connected blocks, okay? So, and I may agree with Mr. Yeager about what the word, I think gateway, I'm not sure if gateway is completely fulfilling everything you're thinking about, but that's very walkable no matter, I mean, it's gonna be easy if I live in that neighborhood to walk up and get a Taco John's taco or Jimmy John's, whatever's in there. So how do you reinforce the walkability of that with the code and still have commercial uses? And that has somewhat to do, it may have something to do with form, which means where do we spin the parking lots? Where do we put the entrances to the buildings? You can put a gas station that's got its side loaded to Washington. It's walkable, it still drives through, whatever. There's lots of ways to do that. If you can get the market, if you can get the thing to behave, that's the thing with the code. We can only push that so far, but that's very, very walkable, and that could be very much a mixed-use district. It doesn't have to be just gateway commercial. And I would, if you spin over to the Cub side too, is it James back there moving, controlling all the puppets?
You have to go down.
Yeah, if you look at the Cub side, you can also see that land, you can see the connected street block pattern. If you just extended that, you begin to think about, because a lot of big boxes go away, they go dark. I mean, you've already had changes in that commercial area. Some cases they go away. Southdale in Twin Cities is literally reinventing itself decade by decade. And that could happen here. You can see all the roads are set up to connect into that, provide a very walkable pattern. So I'll stop there.
Very walkable on one side of the road, but on the other side of the road, you're running.
Not so much.
Mr. Chair, can I interject quickly?
Please, you can.
So imagine yourself sitting at the light right by Cub there and the highway. And tomorrow, if you're sitting at the light there, take a look around and imagine being a pedestrian in that space. It's an extremely punishing environment. I wouldn't say that is your lovely welcome to Brainerd corridor, but it could be. And think about, so we talked about expanding, potentially an offset from the highway for your district or whatever this new swanky term we call it. Does it make sense for us to expand beyond the highway towards Hy-Vee, towards the grocery store? To focus on whatever improvements could occur there to foster walkability or that neighborhood-like experience? So that in that entire triangle or that area there of Cub across the street, and even on the south side of 210 there in the red, what could that look like for you to try to enhance the driver and the pedestrian experience?
Well, I would think right in front of the Cub on 210, I would like to see that trail go down into, instead of being right by the road, why not you have it go down in, you know?
Into the parking lot or into?
Yeah, come down and kind of go down and in and try to avoid the slough and then kind of go back up. But sometimes I think straight paths are kind of boring, so.
And straight paths, any path along a road is kind of hostile. I took my bike from downtown to Lum for a meeting this summer, and it was like, what a big mistake. That was just, what am I doing here? This is just I'm not
Yeah.
welcomed.
But I mean, I think if there's some areas that we can go away from the straightness and move it, down and, do some landscaping or do something, that would help bring
Right.
some interest to that.
Talk to the city engineer and talk about the Cuyuna Trail, because that's actually a state designated trail. The trail in front of Cub, it's actually part of the Cuyuna Lake State Trail. And there's a whole nother subject, but there's the whole, how do you route that trail through town? I won't get into that subject, but that's a whole nother.
But to your point, Mr. Chair, that is affected with the future land use map.
Yeah.
How the city looks at the future of how they want everything to interact, especially along Highway 210, affects things like how we're gonna put in the Cuyuna Lake State Trail.
Okay.
Because if it's gonna stay this unfriendly, pedestrian-unfriendly environment, why on earth would I wanna ride a trail along that?
That was my whole case when they put the trail there, is that that's not,
But
First of
if the city puts
Yeah.
essentially policies in place that make it much, over time, obviously none
Yeah.
of this is gonna happen tomorrow, much more friendly. You know, you talked about how there used to be trees that lined Washington.
yeah, all along.
Well, then I might not care so much if the trail goes right along the highway. You look at Paul Bunyan Trail, there's segments of the Paul Bunyan Trail that sit right next to 371,
Right,
but there's less vegetation, there's trees. It doesn't necessarily feel like you are right on top of a highway.
right, it's back ways. What practical points could we take in terms of designating that? Does the, should we include that as a corridor? I mean, I'm trying to think of, what steps could we take to actually do something like that?
You could potentially regulate the amount of green space within a certain, some municipalities use tiers off of highways for green space. So as you got closer to 210, hypothetically, you could you could ask that there be more green space to allow a buffer between there as you move back into the commercial parts of the property. But if I was designing a path and I wanted to get through Brainerd, that's what I would do. Along the side of the highway, I'd make this much has to be grass and trees, and the sidewalk has to be on the other side of the trees. It's that same kind of thing we've talked about many times with the trees, even with this, on this, with the school, is that there's a method to the madness of using green space between buildings and roads.
Right.
And, that's what I would do personally.
So maybe that's something we need to bring up, and when we get to our form-based, when we get to that level, is to see that as the opportunity when we do that. Is that right? Am I kind of summing it up? Yes, Mr. Lamb.
Mr. Chair, just quick, I can add, if you begin to think about form-based and with commercial uses in relationship to high traffic corridors, you can begin to think about organizing the buildings perpendicular instead of straight on. Because typically, the market wants to put all the parking out there and then the building. But you can organize buildings that are perpendicular, that gives a face and a facade to the street. My experience, MnDOT's not gonna come here and solve any problems, I can guarantee you that. But if you can push as hard as you can with them, I have some colleagues that pushed in Grand Marais and a couple other places to get MnDOT to come to the table and negotiate. I think that's, obviously something we wanna do here, but, so there are ways we can do with form, there's some things we can do with form that can begin to improve that condition, so. Thank you.
Cool, interesting. Any other thoughts? All right, should we move on to our next, where we went through a few slides there, so that puts us up to, number 5, Downtown District? We on the same page there?
Kingwood?
Let's skip by 4.
Kingwood.
4, Kingwood, let's talk Kingwood. All right. Thoughts about what we're looking at here?
Oh, here we go.
I struggled a little bit, Mr. Chair, on how I would differentiate between a mixed commercial residential and a neighborhood mix. And if we throw the 60/40 out, I'm gonna get even more lost on how to cleave this baby.
40,
It felt like, okay, then neighborhood mix must be 40/60 if the other is 60/40, and I don't know how to get at that a little bit. I'm working mostly from the definitions. I know you have some things that the features and criteria in here, but that was one of the things I struggled with a little bit. But I like the what we've designated here is the place to explore this a little bit more.
Other thoughts on Kingwood? Just kind of going block by block here.
And, Mr. Chair,
Yes, please.
on this, going back to what Kevin was saying about architecture, again, that's where form-based would help us, because that's the old house, North Brainerd, it's kind of kind of has their own little way of building. So we could look at trying to maintain some of the character of the neighborhood in there, so that form-based would help us with that.
Absolutely, that's all about character-based zoning.
there's enough there, if there's enough there, we can latch on to it. So, and we walk some of it, so it's an interesting corridor.
Question.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
I just want to draw attention to the definitions that are given. So Kingwood, from the whole stretch, it's across 2 slides, because it's, what, 10 blocks, is neighborhood mix. So in there, just want to draw attention to the definition, talks about its categories, inclusive mix, mix of low density businesses, uses, and range of residential types. Again, I think it's a lot of things that we've discussed over the last year and a half, 2 years. Offices, limited commercial, professional services, daily trip needs, twin homes, townhomes, row houses, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, single family. So it's pretty much run the gambit when it comes to residential, and then those, again, kind of going to those symbiotic use, commercial uses that we already see there in a little bit. You know, we have a few insurance offices. There was a dentist office that was there at Kingwood Square. I wouldn't necessarily that Kingwood Square is a nice little plot there that we would rebuild that there. But those kind of uses are in there. I think in there, like that daily trip needs, that kind of supports that corner store idea, which did used to be there right next to the center, that's now been turned into 2 residences, but historically was there. Again, looking at, as Mr. Lamb pointed out, making it fit within that character, but allowing that whole area to kind of, I think, almost be what towns used to be.
Exactly.
And, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and most of the businesses that are on Kingwood are houses that's been converted into business.
Right.
There's really not a lot of new building down there, so.
Other thoughts?
Chair, as we think about these various districts and such, come back to the transportation infrastructure, the road capacity, we talked about trucks earlier. If Target comes out with a new marketing strategy of mini neighborhood Target stores, that serve the everyday needs of residences, because they also probably have a coffee shop in there that I can go get, the things that I need. We have to think about delivery trucks coming to bring items in there to restock these stores. That's where the commercial, at least it kind of has proximity just by the way we've drawn the maps. I don't know if it's purposeful or not at this point, but those are associated with the high volume roads, the connectors and the county highways and those sorts of things. But as we come off or come down the tier of road capacity, I guess Paul describes it as sort of these smaller streets. You aggregate, these are collectors now, and the collectors then feed into the highway system and then into the state highway system and da-da-da. And do we need to be purposeful about, as we choose these choices here on the map, about that proximity to the appropriate infrastructure to get people and products to the places we're saying they need to go? Is that part of our calculus right now, or is it just fortunate that a lot of this is falling that way?
Great question.
That's kind of what I was trying to say, and you said it so much better. We do have to worry about that. And I know on our home-based businesses, that is one thing that is in the ordinance. You can't have delivery. Can you hear me better?
Thank you.
You cannot have delivery trucks coming to your house every day, and that's what I was trying to say. And so I think that is something we need to kind of look at.
It's also true that things can only be so plain. I work at the Bridge of Harmony downtown. We are I think probably the only business downtown that gets semi-deliveries. We get semi-deliveries. We make a huge mess. Our semi comes in, we block 15 parking spots. It's what it is. But you know what? It's 20 minutes out of every month. And 20 minutes out of every month, we're hauling big speakers in, and we're making a big mess, and we're having a truck where a truck shouldn't be. It's gotta happen. But it's only, you know, in other words, it's gonna be a little messy sometimes.
Yeah, but
So that's kind of what I think.
So
Yeah,
frequency's a variable.
I think so too. It's not like every single day, it's not like a grocery store where every day 7 trucks are gonna show up to unload.
But are you gonna want a semi unloading in Kingwood?
Sure, I would say yes.
Yes?
I
Okay.
would say the inconvenience is 15 minutes,
Yeah.
and that's it. And you can
Okay.
drive around it and joke with the truck driver, usually they're pretty funny. And
I mean, we have it over at Tyrell too, so, you know,
Yeah.
with Ace Hardware back
Yeah,
there. And I don't mean to change the subject, but there's one thing I would like, just to throw this out to Ashley, in that parking lots. We're talking about all this commercial and everything. I would really like to see what kind of options we have for parking at some time. It doesn't have to be now, but that is one thing I think we're kind of, I know you are, I think we're kind of all in that business is gonna need parking lots, I know that, but can we not have a whole half block of parking lots out on Washington Street or something? That's,
No, and I think, and that's definitely something we discussed, maybe not partially at this level, but also at the lower level when we're talking about the zoning code itself. You know, right now, outside of our residential districts, the city says, no off-street parking requirement. You know, we're not gonna require it. Which is sometimes good because you're not having every business have its own parking lot because we're not requiring it. Sometimes that can be bad because then there's, you know, okay, now we're getting complaints from other entities because this other business over here didn't provide any parking, now they're all parking around my building and not mine. You know, and so maybe that's when we get to the zoning code piece, maybe the discussion we wanna start having is instead of saying no minimums, maybe we say we place maximums. You'll have no more than, if you have parking, you will have no more than this. And maybe that's in these areas, that's where that goes into play. So you don't end up with, you know, those debates about the thrifty and whether or not they needed that extra piece of parking.
well, but I think too, I just want to bring it up because with form-based, you know, we're just learning all that, and I think there's probably some nice little tidbits on form-based when it comes to, you know, parking. So that's the only reason I brought it up. Besides, I'm old and I probably would forget in a couple months, so.
Well, you know, in this particular setting, in addition to parking lots, to me, it's easy to put a maximum, because you still have the option for on-street parking. Right, if you're saying you're gonna have parking
Right.
on Kingwood with your associated with business, it's gonna be behind, it's not gonna, or wherever you wanna put it, or describe it, or confine it, and you're gonna say a maximum of this to make sure that you're not just filling the whole lot up with that. But, you know, the response to the pushback on we need more is that option, when you get those rushes, is on-street parking. You know, Walgreens is the same thing. It's largely an empty, hard surface that sheets stormwater that we
Right.
can manage someplace else.
Right.
Parking maximum it's a great shift for you to take control through regulatory means by saying, no, this is the maximum amount of parking stalls that you can use or have or be allocated as a business versus now we implement parking minimums. So you see the parking lot out in front of Hy-Vee, that's a reflection of parking minimums. Target, when are those full? Black Friday. Well, we don't know if we're gonna have Black Friday, so that's a terrible example. But by shifting to parking maximums, it's a great strategy move.
That's the way it is downtown. We get there's certain voices in the community that say there's way too much parking downtown. At 9 in the morning, they're absolutely right. 9 in the morning, it's 20% capacity. 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it's 75, 80% capacity. So there's no way you want to build your parking to 20% capacity. But other thoughts on the corridor, on the Kingwood corridor? Ready to shift our discussion to downtown? All right, we're going downtown. Ashley, any thoughts, any introduction there?
Yes. We had some very interesting and robust discussion about what is the footprint of downtown today and what does it look like into the future. So I want to push you all to do the best that you can, to try to speak about what does the core of downtown mean? What does it look like? Where does it start? Where does it stop? I understand that our neighborhoods don't always work like that. They can have some fuzzy boundaries, that's fine. But I would say the district that's proposed on here doesn't quite yet align with the future land use category language.
Does this show, Mr. Chair, does it show downtown is going across 210?
Yep.
That was a good part of the discussion, last time we met.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
So I'm wondering if, I hate to bring this up, but potentially, are we missing a district here? Downtown and really downtown, or what I'm gonna call as historic downtown? Because when I think of downtown, we've talked about this a little bit last time. Your definition is vastly different than mine.
Much bigger.
Exactly. Mine is 4 blocks, yours
Yep, yep.
is
Yep.
closer to this. So I'm wondering if because of language, for the sake of language and for the sake of planning, if there is potentially a possibility to create another district that is historic downtown, which is the 4-block area, because I think that language is different than what I see across the street from 210 personally. I'm just throwing that out there for
I
discussion.
kind of talked about that too. I just wanted to acknowledge there is the CBD, which is the 4 blocks. But on the other hand, where are we right now? I think we're downtown. Where are we right now? And so that's why I like the term central. I kind of, that term's going to take off, but that was my, central.
Central district?
Any other thoughts on definitions?
Central district, are you
Yeah,
saying?
just call this the central district,
District.
pretty much from Oak Street, all across Washington, or across 210, I should say. And from the river to, I kind of think we've had different definitions, how far you go, maybe 13th Street is this one, but this one goes to 11th, doesn't it?
And I could have captured it wrong, so please.
No, I think that's about right. No,
It's
that's
like a
actually
great
about right.
place to redline.
I think that's about right.
Yeah, because this is the school.
Any
But
thoughts on
I
that?
Mr. Chair, I
Yes,
do agree
please.
with Kevin. I think we have the historical, and I agree with you totally that we have to expand what we call downtown. Because I think we have so much government buildings, and we have the library, all that type of stuff. I think characteristically, I think of that as your downtown too.
Mr. Chair, may I just throw out a suggestion for the
Please.
sake of this conversation and so we aren't on just this for the next hour? Is let's throw out the word downtown.
To historic district is
You
what,
know, well, I'll just say for the purpose of the future,
central
the purpose of the future land use map, what we're saying is what kind of development do we want in this area?
Okay.
You know, I think once we get to, we're working with Jennifer and Mike and we actually get to the discussion of the zoning of these areas, yeah, I think we're gonna start parsing it out. I know when we did the walking tour, this is actually where we started. And one of the things Mike specifically wanted is obviously we did Laurel and we did 7th, but he specifically said, but I also want to see tier B and tier C, tier 1 and tier 2, tier 3. You know, we went all the way over to, 9th. We went all the way down to, I think almost down to Quince. And so we saw what is not just a 4, but what does it look like as we go out? How does it change? And so I think we will absolutely touch those elements once we get to the zoning piece. So for this discussion, my recommendation was let's throw out the word downtown. Maybe the word central is the way to go for this discussion. In this area of town, how do we want it to, what kind of uses and development do we want to see here?
In a word, I'm going to say mixed. I'm going to throw that out there. I think we have to figure out how to support the people who live in this district, and we also have to support business. How do we thread that fine line? I don't know. Mr. Lamb, any insights?
I got here early, just went and walked around downtown, so I have my core map, thank you very much.
Okay.
And I agree with David, we're gonna get into a little more detail. To me, this is the cognitive downtown, okay, I hate to introduce another word, but to me, that's what it is. And there are lots of opportunities as we get off of, I think there's a division at Maple, between Maple and Laurel, it starts to change at the alley. So we'll get into that, I think, in more detail with the zoning. I think for here, probably works, right? In general. We'll have a crazy fun discussion about it with zoning. And Ashley, you're invited.
I'll be there.
All right.
if I may just make an observation.
Yes, please.
one thing that the mixed commercial residential category does is it fixes the line going through Franklin Arts Center. And
Gets rid of that.
if we ever divide buildings because of zoning, I think we got too many categories, or maybe we're not thinking about it right. And so we've got a way here that it seems like, at least here's a way that it has one zoning class, and you know what you can do there
Yeah.
without having to know if I'm in the right wing of the building to be doing what I'm doing. So that was cool.
Other thoughts on the central area?
Our central area and our shopping district.
Yep. If we're okay.
We need another term.
We move on to number,
Mr.
That was
Chair.
what I used on the phone today. I had somebody asking for
Say.
directions to downtown, and I'm like, well, this is our downtown, and, you're gonna head to the shopping district. I threw out another term.
you'll reach the cognitive downtown, yes.
I had to explain it to him about 3 or 4 times, and it finally came out as shopping district because he was looking for the stores.
You get the right word.
I think it should be the Don Gorman Central District. I think we should just go with that.
I like it.
Mr.
great.
Chair,
Is that your word?
Yeah. Pushing that word. I'm invested. Jen?
one thing I'd like would like to see in, the Central District or something, that's where we can put our cultural, cultural
Can't hear you.
identities, or, cultural, I don't know where it fits in here, but, if we could bring in, like, the arts, the art, and, the books are, I think that would be nice to put into this cultural downtown central district, where we could put
Where are
the,
you going there? To our planners, or to Ashley?
So that's a really nice flavor of language to integrate. So we have to highlight some of these growth areas or focus areas. So I would love to integrate some of that flair, feeling, character language into those sections, that supporting language, if you're okay with it being there.
I think
As long as it's somewhere, that's what matters, and
right, but I mean,
finding the right house.
but I think, we're trying to get the identity, and with the fact that we do have the 4 blocks of some very, very interesting building and everything like that, I think it would be kind of nice to put it down in that area it brings people in, so.
We all flew through this section. I was expecting an hour.
On downtown?
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
Tansky kept us moving. It was
We kicked the can.
We did. We definitely kicked the can out.
We'll credit that additional 45 minutes to Mike Lamb in like a month or 2.
All right, number 6, the Mississippi corridor. I have never really heard that exact phrase before, and I like it, because that's where I live. Any thoughts on the Mississippi corridor? It's kind of West Brainerd.
The amount of public, institutional, or semi-public facilities there, it's pretty striking, with the college, the DNR, the high school, the waterworks, up the river. There's a lot of public facilities already there.
And specifically in Southwest, my neighborhood, the 500-pound gorilla is CLC in terms of dominating land use. Another point I keep, this is the point I belabor, you look for green space and parks, there are none. Zip. Actually, I have a technical question here on the striped area, your mixed-use area. That specifically, it's the one that is between like 6th and 8th Street. See what I'm kind of pointing at there? I'm over in Southwest. And so you see 9th Street Southwest, 8th Street Southwest, and then you have that striped area. That area right there.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's actually CLC property, because if you were to open up a little bit, you're gonna see that's going over the softball field and the baseball field.
Okay,
And so for better or worse, I think CLC owns all of that.
excellent. Good catch.
Yeah,
Public.
and I would love them to turn that into the CLC Community Park someday, but that's another crusade of mine.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
I see this corridor, I see it's, for a town that is built on two sides of a river, it is amazing how little we can actually interact with our river in this town. So I think this is absolutely in the domain of, in me being from the park board, this is where my mind goes with this, is can we better improve the citizens' access to the river and experience the river both in many different ways, open space, park space, walking trails, connection. So I see potential for park expansion, park growth, park accessibility. That's where my mind goes with this.
And at the, in one of my other lives, I am on the Mississippi, the Brainerd riverfront. And so you look at May Street. See how May Street is heading towards the river there? Imagine you're on May Street and, or in May Street and you're heading towards the river. That is an overlook area. That's a beautiful
Beautiful,
overlook.
yep.
And one of the things that's really missing on 4th Street is there is no sidewalk. There absolutely is no sidewalk moving north to south. There are a ton of people who live in the college area, super dense area. They walk every day and they have nowhere to walk. So I think you could get a twofer is if you had a sidewalk, and I think it is designated in the city's master transportation bikeable, walkable plan. They have a sidewalk that would go along Southwest 4th, and it would come up to that at the end of May Street where you have the overlook, and that would be a wonderful little overlook. It doesn't have to be a pocket park. It'd just be just an overlook, and you can look and you can see the town and you can see the river, and it'd be a great point of connection. And as long as I'm on a roll, I'll continue down to the college and look at the segment of land that is south of College Drive. And that whole segment right in there is south of College Drive. It's owned by the college. I would love to see that become green space and be designated as green space to the city. And because I doubt the college will ever build going down that hill. That's tough to build going down that hill. They've talked about it with an amphitheater at one point, but the high school kind of beat them to the amphitheater. There are some trails to go through there at that point, but I think that'd be a great way to get green space and access to the river. Ashley?
Can I push you all to talk about this? Does it make, so, Mr. Chair, this is the parcel that you were talking about?
That's the area I'm talking about right there. That's actually, most of it's just south of the parking lot is actually, a lot of it, it's sloped way down is what it's sloped, yeah. Go ahead.
So if we're talking future, green corridor development, does it make sense to expand this, preservation district? So James, if you follow me, so head north.
Yes.
So hop across the river, and then James, if you'll continue to head north. Does it make sense for you to expand along this river here? I understand that this is the HRA high rise, but we're talking future growth in the next 15 to 20 years. I'm not implying to redevelop in this moment the high rise, but should there be an opportunity, does it make sense for you to continue this district all the way up to what would be the fire hall here? It goes all the way down.
I say all the way to Washington Street.
Does it align with your thinking? Does it align with the comprehensive plan for that green corridor development?
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Now
please,
that
yeah.
triangle, that green triangle is where you're doing the canoe, right?
Yep,
Okay.
Kevin can point out, that's good, that's Mississippi Landing
Okay.
trailhead.
Okay, then, so in talking with what Ashley was saying, I know there's been discussion about trying to do some commercial along, some businesses and that
Right.
there. And that, if what Ashley was talking about, that might be a nice addition there. Not necessarily have how many ever stories, but, have a,
They wouldn't have to be in conflict either, because you can
No.
imagine Dairy Queen is a commercial enterprise that's doing just fine where it is. But you go down the hill and you go to the beautiful riparian environment and you're down on the river. And so they're not necessarily in conflict at all.
no.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
I want to throw another wrench into this.
Please.
Only because James and I actually were working on a parcel across the river, the west side, is, in truth, if one of those current uses along the river there, I'll go high-rise to Washington, ever were to go away, I don't think a new use of that kind could go there. The reason I say that is our shoreland ordinance, especially along the river there, is pretty darn restrictive. Pretty much every building on there was built prior to 1990 or even 1980, so they didn't have the restrictions that they have now. So I don't even know, like the high rise, you couldn't put that there today. The fire hall, probably couldn't put that there today. Port home, couldn't put that there today. So my almost question is it even worth putting something as like medium high density residential when in the future, if the high rise would be demolished, it's just gonna be, you know, low density commercial, if that.
Right.
That really speaks to what Kevin has been challenging us, that lens to think through about regulations or buildability, I guess.
That's exactly my point.
So really, my almost question, should both sides, and honestly, this goes on both sides of the river, should everything, all the parcels directly on the river in the future land use, really just be moved to, you know, parks and open space or public, semi-public, because if the existing uses ever go, other than potentially some light, like, you know, light commercial potentially, and then some, you know, maybe some very low density residential,
Right.
there's nothing going there.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
The only thing I would add to that, David, is that there are other ways, there are ways that cities experience and can interact with rivers through commercial settings also. This is restaurants with a great overlook. This is living that has a great view of the river or is based right on the banks of the river. So the only thing I would say is that if we have the ability to have those spaces where we can and where they're appropriate to the land use, I think we should potentially have a system that would allow them to nurture them along to do that. Because I'd love to have this great restaurant right in Brainerd, overlooking the river, overlooking the downtown. We just don't have one now, but
Well,
I could see
I'll be
that.
opening a brew pub someday that's gonna be right on the banks of the river, and we'll have a zip line and the whole thing, and it'll be great.
Done. I'll make a motion on that right now.
So, any thoughts on how, go ahead, yes, please.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, if I could just add a little bit to the conversation about guiding things for public, semi-public uses or open spaces. I do a fair amount of work in the courts, and so from the perspective of your land use plan, you have to be quite careful in what you guide as open space and public, unless you have a tool or a mechanism in which to acquire the property. Because what you're ending up doing is essentially, it's a regulatory taking. So if you end up in court, if you have a private landowner who comes to you and says, what can I do with park and open space land? And you say, well, nothing. You get to enjoy the open space with all of us, and thank you very much. That's actually something you cannot do without having a tool in terms of a plan of how you would actually acquire that land. So essentially what the courts end up looking at is saying you have to leave a reasonable use of land left. So unless you intend to acquire it and making it part of your open space system, you have to give it reasonable use. Reasonable use does not mean you have to guide it for high density residential, but reasonable use does mean you have to give some kind of development entitlement to it. So I just keep that in mind, even when we're talking about FEMA floodplains, even when we're talking about, you know, you might have what we call the MERCA corridor here, overlay, right, where you've got these extra standards. The reality is a developer or a builder may end up pushing back on you as a community and saying, but you've left me with no reasonable use.
Right.
So you just have to be really careful with it in terms of your future land use plan really is that umbrella statement, right? It's your 10,000 foot level. And the tools, the zoning mechanisms or the dimensional standards or the form standards, whatever those are underneath it that come into play to help you start thinking about, well, where could the development actually go? That's really where you get into you really can only have 2 units instead of 20, right?
Right.
So anyway, it's just a little bit of thought for you in terms of when you start coloring the map. Green is tricky. So.
Can we color it green now, and then when we get to the zoning part of it, give the door, I'm just trying to think how Mr. Duvall, maybe you can save us.
Well, hardly.
Sinking ship.
But I would probably want to be more strategic about how I color green up the river corridor. And, you know, to your world, Mr. Chair, your other hat is trying to connect people with the river. Best way to do that is to have the river at their feet. And not all of this river corridor is accessible like that. You know, for example, where the college is and the DNR, and a lot of that west bank is on this particular view of the map is very steep bluff. And so the challenge is getting people up and down that, you know, to be ADA compliant or, you know, if just to have a green space is one thing, but to have it publicly accessible, I would be wanting to be more strategic about where we color that green. And sometimes that green's gonna be on the east bank and sometimes it's gonna be on the west bank. And as we get up, you know, towards Laurel, and, you know, in that area, and we get up towards Washington, the east bank gets harder and harder, and the west bank begins to open up north of Washington, right?
Right. As
And
the river
then,
turns.
you know, a little bit up after Whiskey Creek, again, the east bank. So you might want to think about it in a way that says, if our goal is to just preserve green space and green trees and a water filter, you know, we could do both sides of the river. You know, if we want to put people there, we might want to think about maybe where it's most accessible and we can take foot traffic that doesn't create erosion problems later when people are just kind of finding their own way down the river and skidding down, hanging on to trees
So-
and things.
Mr. Chair, if
Yes,
I
please.
may, just a clarification, I think one thing that what Jennifer said was very, very true, is that pretty much, so, in the summarize of kind of what she said, when it comes to green, or even blue, is if the city doesn't own it today, or does not have a plan in place to acquire it, we can't make it green or blue. Because that, again, that idea is if you know, Mr. Duval, own something on there, or purchase it from another private entity 5 years from now, and decide that, you know what, I'm gonna rip the port home down, I'm gonna do something else there, and we've made it green, the answer is no. The answer is you can use the port home as it is now, but if you rip it down, thanks for the green space.
But could we not, in the current way that we do zoning, make that a conditional use? That as a condition of you being able to redevelop this in a commercial aspect, that you have to allow public use along the river corridor? That it's not a takings then, what you're saying is it's a quid pro quo. I'm gonna give you this development, redevelopment option, but you're gonna have to provide a public use element there as well. Does that?
So, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, so to a certain extent, yes, but you do have to still, you have to give the property some entitlement off it. So even if it's the lowest of your designation, if you will, let's say it's 1 unit, that would be deemed reasonable use. Then you could say, you can have that 1 unit, that's the lowest impact, but if you wanted to do a commercial or a more intensified use, in order to do that, you would be required to do these other things that achieve our objective. Let me give you one other idea, because this is probably something Ashley has used in the past too. I have a community that, we wrote their comprehensive plan in the last year or 2 years, and they had a piece of property that had a lot of environmental value from their perspective. There was a really beautiful old stand of trees on it that they wanted to protect. It had originally been guided for conservation, but they had no plan to take it over, and they didn't have any money to take it over. So we ended up coming up with a new designation, if you will, that was on properties that had this conservation value to it, that we actually called it whatever the district was or the land use designation was, and we added a C and said this is a conservation parcel, meaning there's something of intrinsic environmental quality that's on it that we like. And it was a notice, like a flashing red light to all the developers of, if you're interested in this parcel, there's something of environmental quality here that's important to us. And so, for example, when you're saying we want a connection to the river, if you had a designation that said, okay, this could be low-density residential, for example, LDRC, it's a notice to someone of, this is on the river, this is something that's important to us, and then that becomes the policy or the regulation, but they still end up with an entitlement straight out of the gate. You're not saying we're taking it for conservation, we're saying you're gonna get some entitlement, but there are these things that we want out of it as well. And so then we supported that through a zoning district that came in and implemented that as its objective, right?
Did you draft a language of what constitutes a conservation tag, or did everyone just say, yeah, we think this is,
Well-
because it has trees, or this, is there specific language to?
So we actually use the MLCCS data
Okay.
from the DNR to determine whether things had like been intact, or whether they were altered or in a disturbed state, et cetera. And that really became the baseline for it. That was sort of the check for the people who anecdotally all live around it and go, that's a really important piece of property, right? And then we use the MLCCS to say, yeah, that does have some quality to it.
Understood, thank you.
I don't think we're gonna solve the problem of what to do with the river today, but I think this is something we need to get back to in this. I think we've started a great discussion. Are we okay, like, saying, I think some of these chunks are obvious, like the chunk by the college is obvious, they can go green. Other ones are a little more nuanced. You wanna come back to us on this? Does that make sense to
I'll
everyone?
bring content back.
Okay, 'cause I think this is, it's a rich area we need to continue discussion on. Anything else on number 6? And number 6 is the minutes, when you go down to Rotary Park and all that, that's quite a bit to it. So then we're moving on, are we ready for number 7, the Brainerd Exchange? Ashley, you want to introduce us?
Yes, I'm not sure if I phrased that correctly. I know there's been some business title change at the former NP Center. Okay, we're gonna call this the NP Center instead of the Brainerd Exchange.
But the biggest building is now called the Exchange.
Okay,
Brainerd Exchange is a location within the NP Center.
So it's NP Center?
okay, number 7 is known as the NP Center. This was added at the last discussion. It really is your neighborhood anchor. And you all discussed that potentially a neighborhood mix makes the most sense for the NP Center campus, you could call it.
I just, Mr. Chair, one thing.
Please.
I believe at one time I heard that there was soil contamination here, which deemed this property not ever having the ability to have residential.
I cannot confirm that.
Okay.
Can you deny it?
I think
It wouldn't surprise me, but I cannot confirm that.
Okay.
I think you're right,
If we go to
Kevin.
the east, the answer is yes.
So that's where I was going, is are we putting residential into a place where it can never go
Yeah, no.
anyways? Same conversation as
It
before.
it
but-
is contaminated on the east side.
West side, not so bad, east side, don't go there.
So my question is, should we even give it a residential or neighborhood mix if there's no possibility we could ever build buildings or houses there?
Well, just even still, assuming that there is a residential element that can happen there, this one strikes me as the mixed commercial residential more so. Again, when I was reflecting on the ratio 60/40, this one feels a 60/40. It's probably going to be business heavy or commercial heavy, creative spaces, all kinds of stuff. There's great opportunity for probably some condo development in some of those buildings, or future developed in style with the form. So it didn't feel quite like a neighborhood residential like Kingwood. This one has a different feel about it than that, and it maybe fits more that MCR category.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, granted, we're looking into the future, not necessarily what it is now. But I can say that the current owner of the MP Center has no intention of putting any residential in there.
Okay.
I know currently it's our one mixed-use district. The benefit of that, it actually has been beneficial even already, in that it allows the mix of different commercial uses. And I think that's their intention, is to have everything. There's already a convention center there. There's a coffee shop. There was a brewery that's changing. There's a candy store. Intention is to eventually get a hotel in there. What I've heard, the current owner, his vision, it's his vision, not necessarily the city's vision, but his vision is it's the next, quote, I'll use the word, quote, resort in the Brainerd Lakes area. That's kind of his vision, is it's a, almost in its own, it in and of itself, a one-stop shop. You go there and you have all these other, again, symbiotic uses. So if you're gonna go, try to bring if I'm someone from town, I'm gonna go there and I can go and I can get a drink, I can go get dinner, I can take the kids to get a candy shop and, all the different things. That's what they want that area to be. Again, we're talking also 20, 30 years in the future. Is that what we still want it? Is that what the city still wants it to be is the question. But again, going back to Mr. Jaeger's point is calling it saying that their potential could be residential is that disingenuous because in reality, unless they're gonna do a ton of mediation, which probably would cost millions of dollars, considering that it was a rail yard for 100 years, is that even possible? And maybe just calling it general commercial is the better way to go.
Boy, I still like the residential element of that, and if we want to cast a vision there, and if we also want to get a whistle ordinance for the trains here, this is a perfect place to have residences then as well. We only have, I think we only have like 3 more intersections to redesign, I think, to qualify for that. So, but that commercial's over.
See that coming.
But to think about that, and again, if we want to put our imagination about what things look like 20 or 30 years from now, I don't think any of us would have guessed that during the bottom of the Depression, the state would have voted for a tax increase to fund the outdoors and the arts and clean water, right? But we did it, and that created millions of dollars in money to clean the environment, address water quality issues and recreation opportunities, and we might do that again, and that's coming up, is it 2030 or 20? It's actually probably coming up pretty darn quick that expires, and we'll have an opportunity as voters to relook at that tax constitutional amendment. So, and we might say that let's now address some of the uglies that cost millions and millions of dollars, and let's reclaim our brown space,
So, and I don't disagree with you, Mr. Commissioner. I think one thing, again, maybe this is another area where Ashley and I need to look at and potentially get creative. My only concern about leaving a neighborhood mix is that we're going back to that definition like we did at Kingwood.
Correct.
Is I think there are commercial uses that are, one, that already exist there and are appropriate for this property that would not be appropriate in Kingwood.
Correct.
Again, when we're talking light, so when we're looking at that definition, my concern is, do we put this on this label on this property, and in the future, the current owner or future owner comes in and says, I want to put a hotel, or I want to do this bigger commercial use, and suddenly the answer is, well, no, because we said only light uses. Maybe there's that happy medium that Ashley and I can work on where, again, it still encourages potential residential, but doesn't also discourage, there's already a convention center space there. I wouldn't call that a light use.
Right.
And I think the intention is to try to create that whole facility where we can somehow kind of balance those two things. We don't necessarily want Target to go there, but allows for that flexibility of, if someone wants to come put residences there, absolutely, let's do it, but not, handcuff the current owner or future owners.
If we could have the subjectivity.
Everything just needs a run through.
You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna punt, and I'm gonna say, we're gonna look forward to a new definition, number 7, that kind of addresses what well, Mike, unless you got something.
Save it.
Well, I just wanted to clear what.
Got some
David
insight,
said.
let's hear.
So the existing buildings, you can't use those for live work or artist studio housing or live work, studio housing or condos?
Nope, so in the mixed-use district, as it reads in our ordinance, it pretty much allows everything in B4, 5, 6, I1, I2. So
I'm not asking regulatory, I'm asking, could the buildings be converted for like an artist?
in theory,
studio
yeah.
or
Yes.
In theory, yeah. Right now, what they were used as is that's where the Northern Pacific Railroad used them to build rail cars.
Yeah.
They're just big cavernous buildings.
Right,
I could easily see them being turned into like lofts.
Yeah.
You know, that's something they've already done, and you see it in downtown Minneapolis right now.
Yeah.
Warehouse district.
Huge opportunity there.
Yeah, the size is what's so unique there, and everything's at such a scale. All right, we'll look forward to another definition on that one. How's that sound? Take another shot at it. Number 8, we are Oak and 13th.
Yes, I'll preface this neighborhood note of, so back in 2017, 2018, when we started working on the comp plan, this really was the catalyst for focusing on smart growth principles, recognizing and understanding the importance that the corner store has, walkability, creating these lovely, beautiful neighborhood nodes again. So it's not a big redevelopment area, but it packs a punch. Too small, too big.
Too small was my thought on that. It doesn't capture some of the uses that had occurred in the past and have for now kind of gone away. Was Jack's, is that the bar that was?
John's.
On the
John's
north
bar.
side, on the west, was it between?
Tavern.
John's.
John's bar,
John's,
yeah.
there you go. So John's was there, that's being remodeled or stalled. There was a little street grocery store on the north side there. That, I think, is outside of the current box here. So my thought was maybe to take that to 13th maybe, and take it to 11th, and then maybe go north and south on 13th as well. So take it just a few more blocks. Maybe it's a whole block and a half, maybe each direction, from the intersection of Oak and 13th.
Quint Street is kind of a dividing line there too. Quint's may be a target on the south. You may want to go.
Right, because
find
there's
Quint's.
there's a greenhouse and stuff down on that south side there.
Erickson's,
Erickson's.
Erickson's between Pine and Quint's, somewhere in there, maybe the block down. but Yeah.
So there are sort of uses around there that maybe get to what we're trying to do with the neighborhood mix. And maybe we want to encourage those uses there.
Mr. Chair, so Mike, would you go from like Norwood down to Quince and from 12th to 14th? Or are you thinking going further yet,
Go even a little further to the east, actually.
the east, to the school, towards the school?
Harrison's at 15th. If you see the blue spot there,
Yeah.
that's Harrison, to give you a
Yeah.
reference.
Mm-hmm.
I almost feel like it's the whole length of Oak there, from all the way from 11th to 15th.
It could be a southern Kingwood, right?
Yeah, no, yeah, that's a good way to put it, Mike.
And I don't think we have it in here, but as you go further, further east, pretty much as you run the length of Oak, which, if you go back to its history, was a state highway. There are current or former commercial or light commercial uses all the way to 25. And there still are, so there are still commercial uses once you hit the 1825 intersection. And so almost you want to, I hate to throw a wrench in this, but again, I think it's like another Kingwood. How far do you want to, I like what you're talking about, Commissioner Duval, about how far north and south, and I agree with you on that. But how far east and west you also want to go? Because it could go,
The whole way.
well, in theory, it could go the whole length.
You could bump all the way up to number 10.
The question being is, is that something we want in the future? And that's kind of, I think, the question that's being asked here is, in the future, do you want there to be, or do you want Oak to kind of just turn, other than this intersection, this block area, do we want Oak truly just be a residential street?
Maybe use the chair's analogy, where would I go for a pack of cigarettes? I would have to go to,
Whatever square they call that.
the Pine Square, or I gotta go to Holiday
Yeah.
to get a pack of smokes. And,
Yep.
I wouldn't walk that far for a pack of smokes, but anyway. But I guess to me, you could expand it for that whole one. You've got rental place, you've got nursing home, you've got childhood education center, you've got, you know, at the far end, you actually start getting into some heavy manufacturing with the mobile model
Pretty-
homes or the.
Yeah, pretty much on that, down on the, for the east end, I mean, you got the animal, and then there's a house
Animal
that's
hospital,
commercial, I mean, that's all commercial down at that end. So, and in there, in between there, we have a garage somewhere in there too, so we're going east.
Yeah, Vix.
Fix, yes, yes.
Chair, oh, sorry.
Please.
I'm sensing that we're kind of actually almost being challenged here, because we're being posed with the question of vision versus current dynamic. With Kingwood, it's easy, it's already fairly defined. With this is so muddy here that, and there, it's so weakly defined in either direction of either residential or mixed use that we could, I think David's asking the exact question is, what is our actual vision? Because I think this one is not defined either way, and we could probably impose our will over the course of time on this to match our vision.
And just something I want to add, because it is kind of, I'll call it a current event, and something that's been discussed tonight that I know Commissioner Lambert brought up, is infrastructure. Again, the history of 18 is, of Oak, is that it was a state highway. It was developed to move lots of people, and still lots of people move on it. But also how you choose the future of the street also changes, maybe, you know, with all of this, what it should influence is also, you know, we're doing this at a planning level, affects what the city engineer does when they look at reconstructing streets. And some of you might have seen a question that was, or a challenge that was posed by a member of our community this morning after a recent death on Oak Street of, is it time to re-look at Oak Street? Well, I think the question is, well, first, what do we want on Oak Street? Would answer the question yes or no. If we're looking for we just want residential on Oak Street, then yeah, we need to redesign Oak Street to accomplish the just residential piece. If the answer is no, we actually want this opportunity of a mix, then let's put a pause on redesigning Oak Street.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I guess the other thing too is, do we consider Oak Street a entrance corridor to Brainerd? I mean, we do get quite a bit of traffic from the east coming to Brainerd, so it is almost an equivalent to South Sixth Street and 210, and it's bringing people into town. So if we're thinking that, then I don't think
For many people last summer, it was their way into town. When 210 was shut down between Ironton and Brainerd.
So we need, I think we need to look at that too, because that kind of changes the whole thing too. It's going to be better to have it more on a commercial basis versus residential, if we can.
It's so
I'm sorry,
tricky,
go
because there's so many houses that are mixed in. It's like 5 houses, 2 businesses, 7 houses. So how do you draw, you know, one rule? And I'm struggling with it. I don't have an answer. Mike?
If I were to try to pick some boundaries, if we were to extend it beyond what I proposed at 15th, I would say probably the furthest east you want to go with a neighborhood residential mix is maybe 18th. Because then you lose the north side to the wetland. The south side gets pinched off with a wetland. Then the character does, quite frankly, change there from being a neighborhood like a Kingwood. And if I were to go west, maybe you could take it all the way to 6th, you know, but maybe 8th makes sense there, you know, because then again, now you're getting at that 6th Street corridor there has a little bit of different character as well. So, you know, I might say to if you wanna play around with the elasticity of the east-west dimensions, maybe you say 18th and 8th.
Where does the speed limit change? Is it after 18th? Doesn't it go from 45 to 30 at some point?
Right about that same point.
19th, yeah.
So that's a real character change there too.
I would rather see east and west expansion, not necessarily north and south.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think the same way on that.
So I think actually what we're saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that we want an elongated district along there, not deeper, but longer district, and take a try at it that way. Anybody want to add any instruction on that?
So the general feedback that I've heard, especially this week in light of current incidences on Oak Street, is that the way it's set up right now is not working for the people that are giving feedback on it. They don't like the way the traffic is going through there. If they live there, they don't like the speed limit changes. They either think it should be faster or they think it should be slower, depending on how they're using that street. If we intentionally make it a mixed use, that will bring about more of the changes for safely crossing the street and for safely moving pedestrians and cars together. And if it stays in limbo as it is, we're going to end up with more pedestrian and vehicle incidences like we've been having. So I think intentionally moving it to residential or intentionally moving it to mixed use would give the definition that we need to put in the proper pedestrian
Are you comfortable
intersections.
right now with the 18th or 19th Street as the end of it? Are you comfortable with that, or would you go further? What are you thinking? I mean, we don't have to have an exact answer tonight, but I'm just trying to kind of get a range here.
Well, I think possibly moving it down farther, because the speed is, from a safety standard, the speed is being ignored at that point. So if there is an intentional transition where the trail crossing is, and that portion has whatever means needed, whether they decide it needs to be a stop sign or it needs to be a flashing light crossing, something like that, that might be a better transition point. Or maybe there isn't a transition point because of the mixed use going all the way down.
Could, Mr. Chair, could
Yes,
we
please.
have a kind of a two thing? I guess I would like to go from Sixth Street, that's pretty much all business there. Go past Oak Street, and I would just like to see probably the whole section right now, up to 28th, to be considered mixed use, whatever we were talking about.
Neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I would be thinking, because there's still, for one thing, I would think it would help slow the traffic down, but because there's probably about 4 or 5 blocks that have residential past 13th. Otherwise, most of it seems to be business in there. I don't know, that's what I would like to see, from 6th to 28th.
Ashley, what would you like to ask us? Are we getting close enough in giving you something to work with here? Are we close?
Pause for reaction. So the latest note I have is 6th to 28th. So clearly you're envisioning elongating the corridor.
Yeah, we just need to set the parameters.
Right, we just need to set some.
Can I ask a question of the city planners real quick? So the Kingwood is vastly different because it's not a primary corridor. So the speed is lower, it feels more neighborhood. Is this type of zoning a good fit for this type of road? What I'm getting at here is, do we have a mismatch with use and road that needs to be fixed? You see where I'm going with this?
From,
I see where you're going with
and I
that.
guess I'll kick this off because I don't necessarily. Mike and Jennifer, you can answer, but I know you're not as familiar. But, you know, I agree. I see where Commissioner Woodward's coming from. I would say it's definitely a fit, especially from, if you want to say 6th or 8th to about 19th. It makes sense here. It's after 19th where I think this is where you have planning and engineering start to intersect and try to getting those two things to jive, because as Commissioner Duval pointed out, once you pass 19th, there's very little, if any, development that's probably going to occur on the north side because it's just so wet. And if it does occur, it will probably be some light probably very low density residential, if that occurs at all. Again, because it's just so wet. And so how do you tighten that up when there's not going to be that, likely there will not be that development that there is in this corridor. This corridor, it's easy to kind of tighten things up, and as we know, as we tighten things up, it naturally slows people down. And I think that's the issue once you go east of 19th, is it's wide open.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, outside of doing things like the city being proactive in planting trees or things along the boulevards, I'm not really sure. I think it's a bigger discussion to have because I just don't see the development happening like it will here, or already has here. So that's where I would say I'm 100% comfortable to extend this from 6th or 8th all the way to 19th. Makes complete sense to me.
All right,
After 19th, I'm just uncertain because I think we can put it there, but I just don't feel like the development will happen. And therefore, it won't affect the street as much, and we'll have to take a different approach to
Right.
the actual street construction.
all right, I'm gonna make a call and say it's from 8th to 19th Street along Oak. You all go with that for this, at least, tonight? Good. It's a great discussion on that area. Number 9, highway commercial.
I'm actually still drawing, so I'll say this one. So number 9, we're gonna look at the south portion because we've already kind of looked at the north side. That's where Cub is and all that. We've already kind of looked at that. That big triangle, it's that big red blotch right now. Mike, you had a question about that, didn't you? You came over here.
Well, no, my question was just about commercial.
Or
in
the
general,
Cub.
Just in general in terms of guiding land use and what can we do with it from a zoning standpoint. I don't want any of these land use categories to box us in on being flexible or creative with zoning, okay? So gateway to me, I can make that 500 different things, thank you. Thank you. But, I don't want us to, hamstring ourselves with legal terms.
So this big red box originally, I think Ashley originally had it as industrial because right now much of it is zoned industrial. I asked her to switch it to commercial because, again, as we looked at these number of gateways, entries to our community, this is where things really start to like, oh, I'm in Brainerd now, is about here. And looking at what developments we have there currently and what I think the city would like to see there, that doesn't preclude any other types of development. I think that's just what you see there right now. That southeast tip, as I think Commissioner Duval has pointed out, that's where, I think the city's got some fill lots there, and there's a lot of lowland in there and some wet. Mostly on that west side. What is that right there? 28th. That's where I think you're going to be seeing a lot more of that. I don't foresee or recommend necessarily a drastic change on that. I think commercial is really and truly what we have there right now, not industrial. And I think changing it to commercial would help keep it that way. But also moving further south, really now I'm looking at kind of south of 25. As we make that turn towards that intersection of 25 and 18, first of all, though you have those industrial, so it's lots of that, a lot of those lots that are currently listed industrial right now, that might be an opportunity to be listed as some kind of green space. They're all tax forfeit at the moment, and they are wet. So I guess I would ask the person who's I don't know if I'll use legal expert sparingly. Is there currently tax forfeit? So is the state who owns them? County is the steward. If we made them green, would we now be taking from the state?
You're safer when you do it on land that's publicly owned, like from another agency. And so certainly if it's tax forfeited and the agency is the one who holds it, and then you guide it as park or open space, then when they go to transfer it or sell it, they're selling it with that, you know what I mean? You haven't taken the right away from the state. So it's essentially parks and open space, if you assign it to county-owned property, state-owned property, that's your safest bet in terms of not running afoul, for lack of a better way of saying it.
So in short, this would be an area where I think we could, especially those 6 lots in that corner, in that triangle, I think we could comfortably, and I might recommend making those green parks and open space. Again, because I don't believe they're developable, and I'm not 100% sure if we even if someone can develop them, if we want them developed.
I think of stories and time spent at park board meetings and talking with Tony, and the amount of park space for the city of Brainerd is actually, it's incredible.
It's astronomically high. We're well over the
Yeah.
state average,
I was trying to find
which is good and
appropriate
bad
word.
because of the
Yeah, you
maintenance
far
aspect.
exceed national standards in terms of park space per person in town. I do think of things of, is the park district even interested in acquiring more green space? Is that area already served by parks? If it's not developable though, if nothing can truly be built there,
And as you can see from
it's women.
that doesn't mean someone couldn't, in theory, purchase an astronomical amount of wetland credits.
And dirt.
It's just,
I think I just go back to the comment Commissioner Yeager made at the very beginning of this, is it disingenuous to give them another land use when it's like in reality, is it disingenuous to say, yeah, it's general commercial? In reality, there's no commercial use that's ever gonna go there.
David, can you put that can you put that in conservation? Or is that the same as, park space?
In my mind, it was pretty much the same. If we wanted to, we could create a different conservation. To what Jennifer pointed out before, I think the idea of if you created conservation, I think Ashley and I will be working on something along those lines for the Mississippi River corridor. Is it does preserve it, but also give that potential, but kind of triggers that, we really don't want these developed, but if you really, really, really want to, here is an option.
Got it.
Mr. Chair, I have another
Yes,
question. Does Brainerd do a lot of, when you fill like a land exchange or something, when we have fill ups, swamps or something,
So,
I don't know,
we as
I'm-
a city don't, developers do. Where if they want to, fill in some wetland, that they either have to purchase credits or create wetland where, we as a city, it's not our job to do that, it's the
But do-
developer's job.
But do we have a lot of developers that do that?
It's terribly expensive.
It's terribly
right now.
expensive. Normally, if they do it, they do I need this little spot and I'm gonna do that. They don't do a 40-acre parcel.
Like what we did for Jacobson with the excavating site in that
Yes.
same area, right?
And they got a full delineation and are working very tightly within the area.
Got
And
it.
I think he did purchase some wetland credits
Right.
on the fringes of his buildable area, just to give himself some buffer. But he didn't buy a wetland enough credits to cover that whole lot,
Okay.
because it just would be so expensive.
Are we comfortable with where we're at, or any other suggestions on our area?
Well, Mr. Chair, David, you brought us down all the way through this Highway 25 corridor here in your comments, and I feel this is a significant gateway area, and we just need to think about that. We've got a Welcome to Brainerd water tower sign there at the intersection of Oak and 18 and 25.
Which is the next slide, so James, I think you can comfortably go to the next one.
Number 10.
Number 10. And then I think Commissioner Lambert mentioned, Oak being a pretty important entry point into the city. So that, certainly from that intersection up that 25, we might think about that as a gateway. And whether we think, in the conversation, we talked a bit about something to do with that eastern part of Oak Street. But what I would say is certainly 25 ought to be in that gateway overlay, and for some of the uses that we're talking about, you know, maybe the overlay, requirements for gateway might simply just be, you know, appropriate, screening. Maybe it's about vegetation, up north vegetation or something like that, you know,
And-
or whatever, what have you, in addition to building design.
Mr. Chair, and I just gonna put on for information, David O and I, with MnDOT, we visited, and they're gonna be redoing that bridge over 25. So we've got, so it's going to be kind of a nice area, so, I mean, nice with, because we're not making it just cement colors, but, so, that's a very good idea. And that's probably how you go, would be the road to go east, if you want to go to East Brainerd or Northeast Brainerd, it's gonna, that's the main road.
Other thoughts on number 10?
I would make a comment. I specifically asked Ashley to make that state hospital property mixed residential. I can't remember what you had it before. I can't remember. I asked her specifically to make it mixed residential. The reason being is, I think this one's been brought up many, many times. This is one of those future development areas that I keep my eye on. And one reason I think it's be an easy one to potentially knock out in the future is that it's pretty much ready to go. There's water, there's sewer, it's a flat piece of property right now. Only problem is it's owned by the state, and obviously they care to do nothing, you know, they're not actively out there trying to market it. I think that's the only reason probably why it's not built on already.
Why don't we buy it?
Definition of ready to go.
Yep. And when we talk about, you know, where we are at in our market currently, and I think moving into the future, especially with the housing study that the Crow Wing County HRA recently did, over the next 10 years, all we're seeing is we're gonna need more and more housing, and I see that as an area that it was prime for everything from single family to single family to multifamily being 10, 20, 30 unit buildings right in that area. And that's why I asked her to label it as mixed residential, because I think there is so much potential to go there, and I didn't want to box it into being low, medium, or high. Just kind of keep those options open.
Yeah, treat it as a whole. And besides that, it's only a few blocks to go get your smoke, so.
There you go.
All right.
And it's currently a PUD zone, is that right?
Yes, it's
So,
currently
I mean,
our
that-
only PUD zone.
So it almost fits that, you know, if you were looking at equivalency in jargon here, that's designed to do that very same thing, again, playing with density or various development options within that.
All right, we're ready to move our focus to number 11. Well, I'm afraid this is the last one to go through, guys. but,
Second to last.
Thoughts on
Our
number 11?
second to last one. So this one brings us to the south side of town, Business 371. I suppose you could say there's just I don't know, kind of a mixed bag of items. There wasn't a whole lot of notes other than we want to focus on what the entrance experience will be on the south side of town. Also understanding that it is in some ways, an employment hub. So I'm ready to take notes on this one.
All right.
I think,
Discussion?
Mr. Chair, I think.
Take a shot at it? Yes, go ahead.
I think, I can't find the first part of it, but I think I had wanted to have commercial a little bit more, and I think you've met that I can't find the other one, the first part down.
The north half of it is under the core.
The core,
What-
okay.
What do we call that?
Mississippi Corridor?
Cognitive downtown.
Oh, no, it's the Don Gorman Central District.
Okay, but I see
Okay,
that
no,
you did do what I requested, was to put,
And
Be
I
sure to
think,
cruise.
as we discussed before, this is one area where Business 371 is different from Oak and Kingwood, in that there are some it is, unlike Oak and Kingwood, where it is like residential, commercial, residential, commercial. this area, it is very much of like a noticeable, like, commercial ends, residential starts, and the commercial begins again. Where I don't know if putting a whole corridor of mixed is really appropriate, because you have a, you know, half-mile strip that is purely residential.
The strip that, where you have the rental, that, I think you took it up to Vine, the business went up to Vine.
I think it goes up to right now.
Yeah, it heads up.
To Vine Street, I think, didn't it, or even maybe no,
It goes up to right
Right
now.
Street.
Stops at Wright Street.
coming from the north, going south?
Oh, are you talking about on the other?
Yes, I think it comes up to Vine from going
Oh,
south.
going south, yeah, I think it stops at
Okay,
Vine,
'cause
yeah,
that-
where
that
where
would-
that speedway is.
Mm-hmm,
Yep.
yeah, and see, yeah, you're right, and from there to here, it's not even not a lot of rentals in there, so it is, so I like that, thank you.
And that, trying to think, is that, what's, maybe just answer my own question. I'm looking at the area, the mixed area that's off of, that's to the east of Greenwood there. So east of Greenwood and west of 371, your mixed area in there. Is that, that's a whole section of undeveloped land, is that what we're looking at there?
Yeah, just a second. So the 04 future land use map identifies that as mixed residential.
Right?
I remember what that is right now.
I think it's the old Samaritan,
Can you point with the cursor?
Good Samaritan.
thank you, sorry, Good Samaritan, pardon me.
Oh,
Good Sam,
Yes.
that's Good Sam.
there's church in there. Oh, no.
There's an assisted living component of this too?
All right. That was my only real question in that area.
I do want to point out, so the blue, that kind of triangle, half dome. So right now, that's a nonprofit. I can't remember what business is there.
Was this
so-
Teen Challenge?
Yeah, it's
Yep.
a challenge.
Okay,
Challenge. I mean, me personally, I wouldn't give it a public use. I mean, yes, it's a nonprofit, but it's we give it a commercial zoning, we would zone it as such, not in a public, or we would zone it commercial. I just think it would behoove you to zone it accordingly, or to indicate a future land use of commercial there.
I would agree with that.
instead of,
It's more like a
Consensus.
drafting error
We have a
on my
consensus.
part, sorry about that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
This corridor has the opportunity for future growth yet, undeveloped land, and it has the potential to end up with all the trappings of Washington. So this is one of those places we might really want to focus in very hard to say, how do we not end up with something that recreates Washington and another important entry point? When you think of all the things that are there now and how they're a jumble, the in-between places that haven't been developed yet, how can we favor a way that doesn't just recreate the Washington and have a long-term legacy? Again, this may be how you use the gateway approach here to try and get at that. But that's one of my fears on this side of town is that there's still a lot of land that could be developed, and we have an opportunity to shape that so we don't recreate that Washington problem.
I hear Tim Hortons
Chair?
is
Oh,
looking
sorry.
at property there.
Is it? Perfect.
It was intriguing when we were talking just a little bit earlier about the conservation tag to some, because I almost feel like you could do a corridor tag. Because we're talking about, here we're talking commercial, but it's really, to me, I agree with you, it feels like a gateway area. So I almost feel like this, maybe it is something we could talk about if this has been identified as a gateway in our, even though it may be, because this one is one where we've got pure residential up, but that can still have a gateway or a corridor tag. So, maybe that's something to explore is, giving it a little second identity as it's part of our gateway district or our corridor stuff.
Pat?
Mr.
Your
Chair,
thoughts?
maybe,
Jan?
I don't know if it was Kevin or somebody said, but maybe we should call them welcome corridors instead of gateways. No, I'm just, but I mean, just something that would, because
Inspiring.
you would think, welcome, you're gonna think about having some pleasant things on there, Or we could call it Billboard Street.
Yeah, we talked about high visibility versus gateway, is what I was talking about
Yeah.
earlier, was it's a highly visible part of,
Right,
highly trafficked, highly visible.
It has high visual impact. I like the designation about the discussion of the gateway corridor, that's good. Any other points on this, on number 11?
Can you go as far east as possible in your view? So, like I just wonder what is this development out here? All green roofs, what is that?
Fairgrounds.
Let's figure out,
Oh,
which is not in city limits.
First week of August, gotta be there, nothing like it.
thank you.
Which green are you talking, the one up on top, the corner?
No, he's talking about.
Unless there's a
he's looking-
pandemic
he's looking
going
for the
around.
satellite.
13th?
Not as
I was gonna
good.
say, this
It
year,
loses its luster when there's a pandemic,
Oh,
but
that's fair.
other than that, it's
Yeah.
really.
And that has been, I know, a many-part discussion about that. I think we had a county commissioner ask one of our BPU people as to why they pay a double fee on their water and sewer. And I said, well, because you're not in city limits, and we can fix that if you want to. So,
Yeah,
We have one last area that we want to propose to you.
yeah.
have that.
Can you send us to the far northeast side of town, maybe the larger, far northeast side
The
of town?
first, go to the first one that says, like, the full map on that says FLU,
This one?
Yes,
Okay,
on that one.
there we go.
okay.
Okay, the salmon color up by the airport.
We'll touch that really quick. What did you have that as? I can't remember.
Medium density, low medium.
So this is one, again, I asked Ashley to redo. So this is the Anderson property, just south of the airport. And it's another one of those areas that I kind of identify as that potential future development. And so this is where we came at that salmon color. I think we, again, that, what do we call that? Mixed commercial residential or?
Correct.
Mixed commercial residential. And the reason we put that there is because what I explained to Ashley is one way I see this area as potentially developing is, again, you have your highway, and maybe that's where you put some medium to light commercial. And then as you move back, you kind of can transition to maybe some high density residential, some medium. And then as you get to that far northwest corner that kind of butts up against Easy Street and those houses along Rice Lake, you get into some single family. So it kind of adds that transitional, as you go from a highway back, goes from like you got some commercial, then high density residential, and slowly thins out as you get back. So by the time you're back of it and they're up against the housing that is existing there, it meshes well with what's currently there. One reason I also see that is because that's another one of those areas that's kind of, we've discussed as maybe in that tag area of eventually the city cleaning up its limits and kind of bringing in into the fold. So that's why we tagged it the way we did. And then also with the south side, some of that south side is still undeveloped. But also as we move south, the Anderson Brothers construction current property, moving that to commercial over industrial, looking at, the Anderson Brothers in the future, they're working on buying the property in the industrial park and moving out of there. opportunity for redevelopment, kind of maybe starting to guide what that property be redeveloped as. So when we talk about here, you know, if we wanna talk about gateways, really, first thing you see when you drive into Brainerd, do we want the first thing that people see as they come in from the Ironton Crosby area to be construction yard? Or do we want it to be something else?
And then there's the simple financial fact that the city put $10 million into moving the water and light out to the airport, and maybe it makes some sense to utilize it. Because it's there. Any thoughts on this, Mike?
Mr. Chair, question for David. For that mixed commercial residential, I was just gonna do some quick math here on how much of that parcel is in shoreland and how will that affect, it may affect how you, rather than being a random distribution, it may be a layer cake of uses as you get closer to water. It's gonna be lower density, probably more residential.
And that's what I was proposing, is as you move towards that corner, that's another reason, is, you know, I don't know how much, I think the far west side is a little further from the lake, that northwest corner is closer, so the fringes might be within that shoreline. And again, that's another reason why I'm saying kind of more as you get
Yeah.
outside of that, that's where you're also gonna have that lower density, for one person's shoreland, other person's, again, how it interacts, how it could potentially interact with what's already there, which is shoreline homes. And so you don't wanna necessarily put a apartment complex in as someone's single family's backyard.
So to the extent that we can make our future land use at least compatible with what we think is a somewhat static shoreland process, since there's been several runs at trying to update that, and that's not been successful, so we think it's gonna be static.
All right. Other thoughts? Hearing none? Mike?
Just a quick question,
Yeah,
sorry,
please.
I apologize to you, Mr. Chair, and the commissioners and staff.
You're forgiven already.
How much of city has extended infrastructure out like that? You said $2 million out to the airport, are there other areas like that?
That have water, that have utilities, but are not in the city limits?
Well, they're whatever, I mean, they're abutting land that tends to be developed.
Rivers,
So this section here,
Yeah.
Riverside
Drive.
Drive, although Riverside Drive is already mostly developed
yeah, but they're not in the city.
in the city, but he's talking about development. The other area would be going back to one of the previous slides would be, and we drove down there. And you weren't in my vehicle, but we drove down to Buffalo Hills, hit that dead end and turned around.
Yeah,
That area, cause that goes back into about 800 acres
oh, really?
of currently privately owned property.
That has sewer water?
And the sewer and water stops right where that road stops.
Okay,
And when that was actually reconstructed last year, and when it was reconstructed, the city engineer purposely designed that and put in a 12-inch water main and sewer, with that full intention that one day, that whole area, that 800 acres is gonna get developed. So they purposely sized it for development, so it is ready to go.
thank you very much.
Well, at this point, I'm gonna ask Ashley, how have we done?
You all have done great. I know it's been a long meeting, but we had a lot of things to get through.
Uh-huh.
I might recommend that we talk about expansion boundaries at the next meeting.
Okay.
I think it would make more sense because we'll all be a little bit more awake and attentive to talk about that. I'm not implying you all look tired. What I'm saying is I think we'll be more prepared at the next meeting. I do want to share briefly, James, can you go to the map that shows the expansion footprint?
That one.
So to remind you, anything beyond the current city limits was a direct replica of your 2004 comp plan. We haven't put a lot of thought into that. I will also say that your comp plan does not support a whole lot of outward growth. It's about smart growth, infill development, you've made a stance to develop differently, and I champion you all for that, so just keep that in mind when we talk next time. My colleagues, they serve as the zoning administrators for Crow Wing Township. Ironically, they as well are going through a comp plan update the exact same time that you're going through your amendment, so it was kind of fun for the three of us to chat. They had asked if you all would, if you would entertain the idea of not illustrating future growth into Crow Wing Township on your future land use map. And I said,
we'd like to ask them if they didn't.
And I will bring it forward to the planning commission to discuss. They're envisioning commercial along the 371 corridor. I don't think you would be surprised by that. Of course, any future residential growth is really going to meet the definition of rural residential. Remember, you know, the smallest parcel there can be 2 or 3 acres. That's not even an option in the city of Brainerd.
Wow.
So where you would intersect is on the southwest side along the river. It's targeted for development reserve at this time, which is the closest future land use classification to their rural residential anyways. So I would say that you all are aligning well, but I said that I would bring forward the note that was given to me, and I shared the information.
It's kind of hilarious that they would have to send us that note.
Through a messenger.
Through a messenger.
I don't know.
Ashley, can you do this? Can you give us a boundary map that has all the Brainerd stuff pulled out? And so, in other words, we're looking at just the edges, you see what I mean? So put the city and stuff in town, get it out of there, so it'd be, I think, a little easier to look at.
Clipping it, you mean?
Yeah, that's what I say, clip out the middle
There
so
you
we
go.
can just see
Yep.
what we're imagining.
I'm gonna ask you one, and we can work on this one step further, is if we could almost identify Growing Township and Oaklawn.
Oh,
Because
yes.
it gets
Thank you.
really messy in there.
Yeah, that would help
But-
too. Anything to kind of clean it up so we can really see.
Yeah. I
Mr. Chair,
apologize for that.
Yes, please, Jan.
I mean, we need to clean up our city limits. I mean, we go in, out, in, out, in, out. So, I mean, that's something we have to keep in the back of our mind too. We do need to, you know, go on Riverside Drive, you go up here and then one road goes down to the river, that's not in the city. Then the next one is not in the city. So I think we have to be very cautious, you know, but we agree to, because I think we do need to look at our boundaries. And just clean them up. I mean, Russell Road, one's here, one's in us, one's not, so.
Do you have a joint annexation agreement with Crow Wing Township or Old Lawn? Do you have anything?
Baxter, for that matter, if you consider that you can be at Menards and you can head north and you're in Brainerd. Think about it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna encourage ideas of annexation of Baxter. Generally, results in
I was thinking the
lawsuits
opposite,
that end up in front of the Supreme Court.
I was thinking actually trading them.
I've had a great history with that.
But I think it is important for us to kind of show our, I don't know if interest is the right way to think about it, but at least, you know, what our priorities are, and that we're wanting to think about the orderly business, you know, and so it is fair to look out there and say that it's not probably about future annexation, it's about places we want to have conversations with our neighbors, right? And so if we choose the right words, you know, because I totally understand that the sensitivities that have real economic impacts with these townships, and you can take away a significant part of their cash flow and their economic viability by a poorly planned annexation move that takes away their best source of revenue. So it makes sense that they're concerned and they want to do that. So how we convey that and we think about these areas outside in the future, how are we going to interact with those spaces and what demands are going to be put on our services that we'll have to provide and extend? What opportunities can our services provide to help guide their development? It's a two-way conversation, so maybe just a one-color map outside doesn't necessarily speak as much as maybe, I think maybe what Jan was getting at. There are some priority areas probably within the greater boundary of Brainerd that we might want to say, these are more, probably our places of greatest interest.
Like Fireball Lake, which is a little section all by itself within Brainerd. Yeah. It's
Or,
crazy.
or, up, like, again, Riverside Drive, call and they say they're in City Brainerd, well, they're not. If the emergency services, like the police department, they're not, so then it's a delay getting to the county.
So there's some really good examples
Yep.
that say, these are sensible places that we put energy towards, and these other ones are about being good neighbors and good coordination, communication with the township.
Stop telling the township that what part of Brainerd they're going to be.
Yeah, right.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair, I just have a few,
Please.
closing, I just need 2 more minutes, and then that's the last you'll hear
Go for
from
it.
me until next month. Some of the next steps, so I really want to take a peek into some of the items that were brought up about, taking. So there's some, proposed future green space, future, park and open space, green space, I can't remember the district, park and open space, future growth, outside of city limits. I want to take a peek at that and understand, current ownership. And in terms of next steps and what an amendment process looks like, so it's no different than if you were to adopt a comp plan. You have to go through the same process again. We have to share the document with our township, surrounding city and county partners and friends. We have to pull comment. They'll get 60 days to make those comment. You have to open it up for public review, hold a public hearing. Remember, we're in a pandemic, so we're gonna think really creatively on how we welcome all comments about this plan. It's likely you're not gonna get a ton of folks in this room who are gonna wanna share their feedback on the plan, but there's a ton of excellent options out there that we can pull feedback from them. We'll talk a little bit about that at your next meeting. And I think it would make sense if I could draft a few potential timelines for us to chat about in November.
That sounds great to me. Any other comments? Otherwise, that sounds great to me. All right. That was a very interesting 2.5 hours. And and I'm not being facetious, that really was interesting. Really true. All right, number 8, commissioners' questions and comments. Are we out? Oh, Mike, there we
Yeah,
go.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I was waiting for
Sorry,
it.
sorry. Sidewalks were great walking over here from Northwest Second all the way to the City Hall. One of the things that I noticed, though, that all of the accessibility ramps were horrible. So the walks were clean, but if you have to drop down to the accessibility ramps on the sidewalks, and it's, it's such an important part of our comp plan and our vision is about mobility, walkability, bikeability, accessibility to all. We've got to get better than that, and we're going to get more snow here. So it's just the first storm of the season, and I know it's a wet one and all, but the fact that the sidewalks were clear, the ramps were, bummer. I look forward to working with our consultants here on helping us think about picking up conversations on lighting as well that we've done. We've dabbled in a little bit and helping us think about how to do outdoor lighting for parking lots, for signs and other things like that. And experiences and ideas that you can help us with. So, thank you.
Very good. Other questions? Yes, Mr.
Real quickly, I just wanted to I'm not sure if anybody knows, but City Council did unanimously vote to adopt a interim public works department. So speaking directly about snow removal, this came right to my mind immediately when you said that. So the idea now, or at least currently in play, is that instead of the parks maintenance crew working only on their stuff and the city and the street guys working only on their stuff, all of those are now combined in an interim public works department, which will give Paul the ability to have more manpower at any given time to accomplish those tasks. I see really no difference for 90% of the time, but that 10% of the time when we just need that extra oomph with guys, I think either on the park side or the street side, I think the Public Works will now be able to help us with that. So just wanted to say, I think that's a great thing, and I appreciate City Council for taking that up and running with it. I hope that it works out.
I think it makes a ton of sense. My boss lives down on the South 7th and walks to work every day through the winter. And the Parks and Recreation Department guy drives by with his little snowplow guy on his way down to Bain Park and doesn't do any of the sidewalks. What if he just hit the sidewalks along the way and hit the accessibility ramps? It would be like the city working together. It'd be great. All
Yeah,
right,
that was a very good plan on parks, so thank you.
I like it. Number 9 would be.
Can I add something real
Yes,
quick
you
on,
may.
for comments? I wanted to bring up number 8 again, the Oak Street corridor. I've heard feedback from community members and specifically from Mr. Marone, who used to be a commissioner on here. He has volunteered if we can put together a committee to look deeper into the Oak Street traffic issues to help with our redevelopment of that area, whatever we decide our future land use is going to be or how that should be developed or redeveloped. Putting together a group to work with the city and MnDOT to improve the safety on both Oak Street and Mill Avenue would do a lot to help our citizens. And as long as we have a community volunteer who has already stepped forward, I think is worth looking at to see what we can do to contribute to that effort.
I would agree. Very good.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
I have to bug Teresa. How is the food co-op growing downtown? When do you open, or have you opened?
It has not opened yet. There are more delays than anybody could have ever imagined. Everything from, the flooring factory or the tile factory was shut down for a little while, and all of a sudden that had to come from somewhere else, and there's another delay, and compressor parts had to come from somewhere else, and then there's another 2 weeks on that, and so now we're down to floor refinishing and finalizations of pieces, and hopefully it will come together.
It will.
Excellent. Number 9. Got anything for us, David?
The only thing I've got right now is next month we will have some regular agenda items back on the agenda. Hopefully for the final time for the next, years, the school ISD 181 will be back before you for South Campus, which is the last item on their bucket. So we as staff already met with them last week and did a full overall of their plan, and they'll be back before you for the CUP for that project next month. That's all I have.
Very good. Number 10, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Member, so move.
I hear a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Love the new gavel. Great.
That baby
So
sings, man.
that's an actual new